Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Dark Harry. We are thrilled to present today's story. What if Gomez Addams took Harry to the Ministry and sued Dumbledore for child abuse? Wizarding world collapsed. If these stories bring joy to your day, please consider liking and subscribing. Every bit of support helps us continue this passion project. Now, prepare yourself for an amazing tale. Chapter 1. The boy who was found. Gomez Addams hung halfway out the window of their vintage hearse, waving his Cuban cigar enthusiastically as they cruised down Privet Drive. The pristine suburban neighborhood with its identical houses and manicured lawns made his stomach turn. But business was business, even in this bland wasteland of conformity. Tish! Look at these houses. So conventional, so ordinary. He shuddered dramatically. It's absolutely horrifying. Morticia smiled from the driver's seat, her pale fingers elegantly draped over the steering wheel. Calm yourself, mon cher. We're only here because cousin Itt's investment firm purchased that property at number 16. Once we inspect it, we can leave this dreadful cheerfulness behind. Thank heavens. Another minute in this neighborhood and I might develop an appreciation for pastels. Gomez pulled himself back into the car, just as something caught his eye. A small boy, impossibly thin and wearing clothes several sizes too large, was struggling with garden shears nearly half his size as he trimmed hedges outside number 4. His messy black hair partially obscured his face, but not the unmistakable exhaustion in his posture. Stop the car, Tish, Gomez commanded, suddenly serious. The hearse screeched to a halt, drawing curious stares from nearby neighbors peeking through their blinds. What is it, darling? Morticia asked, following his gaze to the boy who was now frantically working faster, obviously concerned about the attention. That child. Look at him, working in this heat, those clothes, that demeanor. Gomez's usually jovial face darkened. I recognize the signs. Someone's mistreating that boy. Wednesday and Pugsley, who had been silently plotting something involving a jar of spiders in the back seat, poked their heads forward. Is he a prisoner? Wednesday asked, her dark eyes narrowing with interest. Not officially, cara mia, Gomez replied, but perhaps in all the ways that matter. Before Morticia could respond, Gomez had leapt from the car and was striding purposefully toward number 4. The Addams patriarch might seem like a madcap eccentric to most, but beneath his wild energy lay the heart of a man who took family, all family, very seriously. Harry Potter's hands were blistered and raw. Uncle Vernon had insisted the hedges needed to be perfectly trimmed before his dinner party tonight, and Aunt Petunia had been checking his progress every 30 minutes with increasing criticism. He was so focused on avoiding another punishment that he didn't notice the approaching stranger until a shadow fell across the hedge. Hello there, my boy, came an enthusiastic voice with an accent Harry couldn't quite place. Harry looked up and nearly dropped the shears. The man before him was unlike anyone he'd ever seen in Little Whinging. He wore a pinstriped suit that seemed to belong to another era, his hair was slicked back, and a thin mustache adorned his animated face. Most striking was how the man looked directly at Harry, not through him or with the usual adult dismissal, but with genuine interest. Hello, sir, Harry replied cautiously, years of conditioning making him instantly wary of drawing attention. Quite a job they've given you there. The strange man gestured at the half-trimmed hedge. Those shears look heavier than you are. I'm Gomez Addams, by the way. He extended his hand. Harry hesitated before shaking it, surprised by the firm but gentle handshake. I'm Harry, sir. Harry Potter. Something flickered in Gomez's eyes, recognition, but before Harry could process it, the front door of number 4 slammed open. Boy! Who are you talking to? Petunia Dursley's shrill voice cut through the air as she marched toward them, her face pinched with suspicion. When she spotted Gomez, she stopped abruptly, taking in his unusual appearance with naked disapproval. Ah! You must be the lady of the house. Gomez exclaimed, sweeping into an elegant bow that seemed to horrify Petunia even more. Gomez Addams, at your service. I was just admiring your young man's dedication to landscaping. Quite impressive for a child his age to handle such tools. Petunia's eyes darted nervously to the neighbor's windows. He's just doing his chores, she said stiffly. Harry, get back to work immediately. Chores. Gomez's eyebrows shot up. My dear woman, those aren't chores, that's manual labor. The boy's hands are raw. His voice had lost its jovial tone, replaced by something harder. I don't believe we've been properly introduced. Your name is Petunia Dursley, she answered automatically, then seemed to regret it. And I don't see how my nephew's responsibilities are any of your business, Mr. Addams. By now, Morticia had glided up beside her husband, Wednesday and Pugsley flanking her like small, solemn shadows. Children should have responsibilities, certainly, Morticia agreed, her voice smooth as silk. Our Wednesday has been responsible for feeding the piranhas since she was 4. But there's a difference between responsibility and exploitation, wouldn't you agree? Petunia paled at the sight of the entire family. They stood out against Privet Drive's beige backdrop like ravens at a garden party. I don't know who you people think you are, she hissed, lowering her voice, but I suggest you leave before my husband returns. Actually, I think we'll wait for him, Gomez declared, pulling out a cigar. I'm quite interested in discussing your nephew's living arrangements. Harry watched this exchange with growing alarm. No one had ever confronted the Dursleys about him before. Teachers, neighbors, even the school nurse had occasionally given concerned looks but ultimately looked away. These strangers weren't looking away. You can't just, Petunia spluttered, then grabbed Harry's arm. Get inside now. Harry winced at her grip, and that was when everything changed. Gomez moved with surprising speed, his hand gently but firmly removing Petunia's fingers from Harry's arm. My dear lady, he said quietly, I wouldn't do that if I were you. The air between them crackled with tension. This is private property, Petunia spat. I'm calling the police. Excellent idea, Morticia agreed pleasantly. I'm sure they'd be very interested in examining Harry's living conditions. Perhaps they could start with that cupboard under your stairs. The one with the small cot inside that smells of mildew and desperation. Children have such keen observational skills, she added, nodding toward Wednesday, who stood impassively by Harry's side. Harry's heart hammered in his chest. How did they know about his cupboard? The color drained from Petunia's face. Who are you people? How do you? The mail slot, Wednesday explained flatly, addressing Harry rather than Petunia. When your aunt opened the door, I saw letters addressed to Harry Potter, the cupboard under the stairs. Obvious conclusion. Brilliant deduction, Wednesday. Gomez beamed at his daughter before turning back to Petunia. Now, Mrs. Dursley, perhaps we should continue this conversation inside, away from your neighbor's prying eyes? Petunia's gaze darted around wildly, noting the curtains twitching in several windows. Caught between her fear of scandal and her fear of these strange people, scandal ultimately proved the greater terror. She nodded stiffly and marched toward the house. Harry found himself walking beside the girl called Wednesday, who regarded him with curious intensity. Do you really sleep in a cupboard? She asked. Harry nodded reluctantly. Interesting. We have several excellent cupboards at our home, but we save them for storing poisons and occasional visiting relatives. Harry wasn't sure how to respond to that. Inside the house, Petunia sat rigidly on the edge of the sofa, looking like she wished she could disinfect at the moment these people left. Gomez declined to sit, instead prowling around the living room, examining the multitude of Dudley's photos with puzzled interest. Curious, he remarked. You appear to have documented the growth of one child quite thoroughly, while the other. He gestured toward Harry. My son Dudley is at a friend's house, Petunia said tightly, ignoring the implication. Harry, Morticia addressed him directly, her voice gentler than it had been with Petunia. How long have you lived with your aunt and uncle? Since I was a baby, Harry replied hesitantly. After my parents died in a car crash. The Addams family exchanged significant looks. A car crash. Gomez repeated, his expression darkening. Is that what they told you? Confusion bloomed on Harry's face. Yes. That's how I got my scar, too. He lifted his fringe to reveal the lightning bolt mark. Gomez's cigar dropped from suddenly slack fingers. Morticia gasped softly. Even Wednesday and Pugsley seemed momentarily startled. Great Scott, Gomez whispered. You don't know, do you? You have no idea who you are. I know who I am, Harry said defensively. I'm Harry Potter. Yes, you are, Morticia agreed. Harry Potter, the boy who lived. Petunia let out a strangled noise. Stop it. We swore when we took him in that we'd put an end to all that nonsense. Nonsense? Gomez rounded on her. You mean his heritage? His birthright? The truth about his parents' sacrifice? We didn't want him turning out like them. Petunia shouted, losing her composure entirely. Freaks. My perfect sister and her worthless husband, blown up by their freakishness, leaving us stuck with their son. Harry felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. Blown up? You said it was a car crash. Your parents, Morticia said quietly, kneeling to meet Harry's eyes, were murdered, Harry. By a very dark wizard. They died protecting you, and somehow, you survived the curse that killed them, the curse that gave you that scar. In the magical world, you're quite famous for it. Harry stared at her, unable to process these words that simultaneously felt like nonsense and truth. Magical world. Oh, capital. Gomez exclaimed. They've kept that from him too. Mrs. Dursley, are you telling me this boy doesn't know he's a wizard? He is not. Petunia shrieked, jumping to her feet. We've spent 10 years trying to stamp it out of him. The silence that followed was deafening. Gomez's face had transformed, the jovial eccentricity replaced by cold fury. Stamp it out, he repeated softly. Like his magic is some sort of disease. Like he's something to be corrected rather than celebrated. The front door banged open, and Vernon Dursley's bulk filled the doorway. Petunia, why is there a hearse parked? He stopped cold at the sight of the strangers in his living room. Who the devil are you people? What are you doing in my house? Ah, Mr. Dursley. Gomez's smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. Perfect timing. We were just discussing your nephew's magical heritage and your apparently vigorous attempts to, how did your wife put it? Stamp it out of him. Vernon's face cycled through several colors before settling on a dangerous purple. Get out. Get out of my house this instant. There's no such thing as magic, and I won't have you filling the boy's head with such rubbish. No such thing as magic. Pugsley spoke up for the first time, looking genuinely confused. Then how does Uncle Fester light bulbs with his mouth? Or thing move without a body? Wednesday added. Vernon looked like he might explode. I said get out. With pleasure, Gomez replied. And we'll be taking Harry with us. The room went still. You most certainly will not, Vernon snarled. The boy stays here. The boy, Gomez countered, is being neglected and abused in your home. His heritage is being denied, his potential suppressed, and from the looks of those clothes and his thin frame, his basic needs barely met. We gave him a roof over his head. Vernon shouted. We never asked to be saddled with him. And yet, Morticia observed coldly, you accepted the responsibility, and presumably the stipend that came with it. This shot in the dark struck home, Vernon's face drained of color. What stipend? Harry asked, finding his voice. The financial support that typically accompanies magical orphans placed with Muggle, non-magical, families, Morticia explained. Especially for someone of your prominence. Harry turned to his aunt and uncle. You've been paid to keep me, while making me sleep in a cupboard and wear Dudley's old clothes. We owe you no explanations. Vernon bellowed. And you're not going anywhere with these freaks. On the contrary, said Gomez, producing what appeared to be a business card from his pocket, I believe we have sufficient grounds to remove Harry temporarily while the authorities investigate his living conditions. He handed the card to Vernon, whose eyes bulged as he read it. You're a lawyer? He asked incredulously. Among other things, Gomez smiled. I've passed the bar in 7 countries, mostly for amusement, but it does come in handy now and then. Now, Harry, why don't you gather whatever possessions you value while we continue this discussion? Harry hesitated, torn between fear of punishment and the wild, impossible hope these strangers were offering. Go on, Harry, Morticia encouraged gently. With a last glance at his aunt and uncle's furious faces, Harry darted to his cupboard. There wasn't much to gather: some broken toy soldiers Dudley had discarded, a couple of outgrown shirts that were the least offensive of his hand-me-downs, and a small, tattered blanket he'd had for as long as he could remember. He stuffed everything into a plastic grocery bag and returned to the living room, where the atmosphere could have frozen lava. That's everything? Wednesday asked, eyeing the pathetic bag. Harry nodded, embarrassed. Magnificent. Gomez clapped his hands together. A young man of minimal attachments. You'll fit right in with us, my boy. Now see here, Vernon began, but Gomez cut him off with a wave of his hand. Mr. Dursley, you have 2 options. Option 1, Harry comes with us voluntarily for let's call it an extended visit, while certain inquiries are made about his welfare. Option 2, I place a call to both Child Protective Services and certain magical authorities about your treatment of your nephew, resulting in a very public, very messy investigation that I guarantee will fascinate your neighbors for years to come. Vernon and Petunia exchanged horrified glances at the mention of neighbors and publicity. You can't just take him, Petunia protested weakly. There are arrangements. Protections. Ah yes, the blood wards, Morticia nodded, earning another shocked look from the Dursleys. Rest assured, we're familiar with ancient protection magic. If anything, they'll function more effectively when Harry's actually cared for, given that they're powered by familial bonds, which you've done your best to sever. How do you know about? Petunia started. The magical world is small, Mrs. Dursley, and the Addams family has connections. Morticia's smile would have made a shark rethink its life choices. Now, what shall it be? The quiet option, or the spectacular public scandal option? Personally, I'm partial to scandals, they add such zest to otherwise tedious legal proceedings. The Dursleys crumpled, their fear of exposure outweighing everything else. Fine, Vernon ground out. Take him. But don't come crying to us when his freakishness causes problems. His freakishness, as you so charmingly put it, will be celebrated in our home, Gomez declared. He turned to Harry with a warm smile. What do you say, my boy? Fancy a change of scenery? Harry looked from the Dursleys to the strange family who had burst into his life like a fever dream. They were odd, undoubtedly, but they'd shown more concern for him in an hour than his relatives had in 10 years. And they knew about his parents, his real parents, who weren't drunks or failures, but wizards who had been murdered. Yes, he said firmly. I'd like to go with you. Capital. Gomez beamed, placing a hand on Harry's shoulder. We'll send for his school records and such later. Come along, family. As they headed for the door, Petunia called out, wait. What about him? Won't he be looking for the boy? Gomez paused, a dangerous glint in his eye. Him? You mean Albus Dumbledore? Oh, I'm counting on it, Mrs. Dursley. In fact, I'm looking forward to it. The drive to the Addams family's temporary London residence was unlike anything Harry had ever experienced. The ancient hearse moved with surprising speed through the suburban streets, with Gomez now at the wheel, driving with a reckless enthusiasm that had Harry clutching his seat. So, Wednesday said, studying Harry with intense interest, you didn't know you're a wizard? Harry shook his head. I still don't know if I believe it. Have strange things ever happened around you? Pugsley asked eagerly. Especially when you were angry or scared? Harry thought about it. The vanishing glass at the zoo. His hair growing back overnight after Aunt Petunia cut it. Somehow ending up on the school roof when Dudley's gang was chasing him. Yes, he admitted. Lots of times. I always got punished for it. Punished for accidental magic? Gomez sounded outraged from the driver's seat. That's like punishing a bird for flying. It's your nature, my boy. What kind of punishments? Wednesday asked with clinical curiosity. Wednesday, dear, Morticia intervened smoothly, Harry may not wish to discuss such things yet. When he's ready, I'm sure he'll share. Harry shot her a grateful look. Will I really go to a magic school? He asked, remembering Petunia's bitter words about her sister. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Morticia confirmed. One of the finest magical institutions in the world. You should receive your official letter around your 11th birthday. But how do you know all this? Are you wizards too? Gomez chuckled, taking a curve at alarming speed. The Addams family defies simple categorization, my boy. Magic runs in our blood, certainly, but not quite in the wand-waving way of modern wizardry. Our magic is older, wilder, tied to blood and bone and ancient oaths. What Gomez means, Morticia translated, seeing Harry's confusion, is that we exist somewhat adjacent to the traditional wizarding community. We know of them, interact with them occasionally, but we follow different magical traditions. We're special, Pugsley said proudly. We're outcasts, Wednesday corrected. Even among outcasts. And gloriously so. Gomez declared, swerving around a double-decker bus with inches to spare. Being normal is vastly overrated, Harry. Take it from a family that's been happily abnormal for centuries. Harry found himself smiling, a real smile that felt strange on his face after so long. Where are we going now? Our London house, Morticia explained. We maintain residences in several countries for business purposes. And what happens after that? Harry asked, uncertainty creeping back in. Will I stay with you until school starts? Gomez and Morticia exchanged a look in the rearview mirror. That depends on several factors, Morticia said carefully. There will likely be interested parties who'll have opinions about your placement. Dumbledore, Harry remembered. The man you mentioned to Aunt Petunia. Precisely, Gomez nodded. The esteemed headmaster of Hogwarts, who, for reasons I intend to discover, decided to place you with those magic-hating relatives of yours and then apparently never checked on your welfare. But why would he care where I live? I'm nobody. The car went silent for a moment. Harry, Morticia said gently, you are very much somebody in the wizarding world. The night your parents died, you somehow survived a curse that no one had ever survived before. And the dark wizard who cast it, who had terrorized magical Britain for years, disappeared that same night. People believe you destroyed him. Harry stared at her in disbelief. Me? But I was a baby. I can't have destroyed anyone. Hence the mystery, Gomez said cheerfully, making a hairpin turn that had everyone sliding across their seats. And where there's mystery, there's usually something interesting happening beneath the surface. Which reminds me, he pulled a small black device from his pocket and pressed a button. Lurch. Prepare the guest room for a young visitor. And call cousin ITT, tell him we need everything he can find on Harry Potter, Albus Dumbledore, and magical guardianship laws in Britain. Yes, everything. We'll be there in 10 minutes. Harry couldn't hear the response, but Gomez seemed satisfied with it. Who's Lurch? And cousin ITT? Harry asked. Lurch is our butler, Wednesday explained. And cousin ITT knows things. All sorts of things, Pugsley added with a grin. When you've been considered odd for as many generations as the Addams family has, Morticia explained, you learn to develop resources and connections in unusual places. Information becomes your ally. And lawyers, Gomez added cheerfully. Never underestimate the power of a good lawyer in a world that thinks it's above mundane concerns. The magical community is woefully underprepared for legal warfare. The hearse turned down a street in what Harry recognized as one of London's wealthier neighborhoods, finally pulling up before an imposing Victorian mansion that somehow managed to look both grand and slightly menacing. Unlike the other immaculate homes on the street, this one embraced a certain Gothic decay that seemed deliberate rather than neglectful. "Home sweet home," Gomez announced. "Temporarily, at least. Our main residence in America has much more character, dungeons, quicksand pits, the works." Harry couldn't tell if he was joking. The front door swung open before they reached it, revealing the tallest, most cadaverous man Harry had ever seen. He wore a butler's uniform and had a face that appeared permanently frozen in an expression of pained endurance. "Ah, Lurch." Gomez greeted him enthusiastically. "May I present our guest? Harry Potter, the boy who lived himself. Harry, this is Lurch, the backbone of our household operations." Lurch emitted a low, rumbling groan that somehow conveyed both greeting and surprise. "Yes, it is rather unexpected," Morticia agreed, as if Lurch had spoken actual words. "But fate works in delightfully macabre ways. Is the guest room prepared?" Lurch nodded and groaned again. "Excellent. And has Cousin Itt called back yet?" Another groan, this one affirmative. "Perfect. Harry, come in, come in. I imagine this is all quite overwhelming, but there's nothing like a cup of henbane tea to settle the nerves." Gomez ushered him inside. The interior of the house was a revelation to Harry. Unlike the sterile perfection of Privet Drive, this place celebrated the unusual. Exotic plants with suspicious movements occupied corners, strange artifacts lined the walls, and the furniture, though elegant, had a decidedly antiquated flair. "This is all temporary decor, of course," Morticia explained, noting Harry's wide-eyed gaze. "When we travel, we bring only the essentials." A disembodied hand scuttled across the floor, paused to give Harry a little wave, then continued on its way. "Was that?" Harry began. "Thing." Gomez called after the hand. "Don't be rude. Come back and properly introduce yourself to our guest." The hand reversed course, skittered up to Harry, and extended its index finger in what was clearly meant to be a handshake. Strangely, after the revelations of the day, a disembodied hand seemed almost mundane to Harry. He shook the offered finger gently. "Hello, Thing. I'm Harry." Thing responded with an enthusiastic series of taps and gestures. "He says you have a strong grip for someone so underfed," Wednesday translated. "And that your magical aura is unusual." "Thing can see magic?" Harry asked, fascinated despite his exhaustion. "Thing can sense many things that others miss," Morticia confirmed. "It's what makes him invaluable as a secretary." Before Harry could process this, an odd noise that sounded like high-speed gibberish filled the room. Harry turned to see what appeared to be a moving pile of long blonde hair enter the room, gesturing expressively with gloved hands. "Cousin Itt," Gomez exclaimed. "You're just in time. What have you discovered?" The hair creature, Cousin Itt, apparently, launched into another round of unintelligible sounds, this time directed at Harry. "Itt says it's an honor to meet you," Morticia translated. "And that your case presents fascinating legal complexities. You understand that?" Harry asked incredulously. "Of course," Wednesday said, as if it were obvious. "Itt speaks perfectly clearly." Cousin Itt continued his rapid-fire communication, with Gomez nodding thoughtfully. I see, he muttered. "So Dumbledore was named Magical Guardian due to his position as Chief Warlock when no Godfather could be located. Ministry records sealed by executive order. Gringotts accounts under management hold. What? Gomez nearly jumped out of his shoes. Harry, my boy, did you know you're heir to one of Britain's oldest wizarding fortunes? Harry shook his head, feeling increasingly like he'd fallen down a rabbit hole. I don't know anything about my family. The Dursleys never talked about them, except to say they were worthless. Gomez looked positively murderous for a moment before regaining his composure. Well, that's another grievance for the list. What about the godfather situation? The paperwork says no godfather could be located, but surely the Potters named someone. Made a series of sounds that caused even Morticia's eyebrows to rise. Sirius Black, she repeated. Imprisoned in Azkaban without a trial? That can't be right, even magical Britain must follow basic judicial procedures. Apparently not. Gomez seemed almost delighted by this discovery. Oh, this gets better by the minute. We're not just dealing with child endangerment and neglect, we've got potential criminal conspiracy, judicial misconduct, financial impropriety. Gomez, Morticia cautioned, gesturing subtly toward Harry, whose head was spinning with all this information. Ah, yes, of course, Gomez reined himself in. The details can wait. Harry looks dead on his feet, and not in the good way. He knelt down to Harry's level. My boy, you've had quite a day. How about we show you to your room, let you rest, and tomorrow we can discuss what happens next. Harry nodded gratefully. Thank you, Mr. Addams. Gomez, please. Mr. Addams was my father, and even he preferred to be called Old Grave Dirt for reasons no one ever fully explained. Lurch led Harry upstairs to a guest room that, while decorated with the same Gothic sensibility as the rest of the house, was more comfortable than anything Harry had experienced before. The four-poster bed with its black silk sheets seemed impossibly large after years in a cupboard. Will this be adequate? Morticia asked, having followed them up. It's brilliant, Harry said sincerely. I've never had a real room before. Something flashed in Morticia's eyes, anger, perhaps, but quickly controlled. Well, you do now. The bathroom is through that door, and I've had Lurch place some of Pugsley's clothes on the chair for you to use until we can get you proper things of your own. You don't have to, Harry began. We want to, Morticia cut him off gently. Harry, I know we're strangers to you, and this has all happened very quickly. But I want you to know something. She knelt gracefully before him, her dark eyes meeting his. The Addams family takes care of its own, and anyone under our protection becomes, in a sense, one of us. You are safe here. Do you understand? Harry nodded, a lump forming in his throat. Good. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be interesting. After Morticia left, Harry changed into the borrowed pajamas, black, of course, with what looked like small skulls patterned on them, used the bathroom, which featured gargoyle-shaped fixtures that actually moved when you weren't looking directly at them, and climbed into the enormous bed. Despite the strangeness of his surroundings and the overwhelming events of the day, Harry felt a sense of peace he couldn't remember ever experiencing before. These people, this bizarre, macabre family, had seen him, really seen him, and decided he was worth fighting for. As he drifted off to sleep, Harry thought he heard voices from downstairs, Gomez's passionate declarations about criminal negligence and systemic failure, Morticia's cooler, more measured responses, and the strange chattering of cousin Itt. They were making plans, he realized. Plans that involved him. For the first time in his life, Harry Potter fell asleep feeling something dangerously close to hope. The peace was short-lived. Harry jolted awake in the middle of the night to find a tall, elderly man with a long silver beard standing at the foot of his bed. The man wore magnificent purple robes embroidered with silver stars, and half-moon spectacles perched on his crooked nose. Hello, Harry, the man said gently. I'm Albus Dumbledore. Harry sat up, instantly alert. You're the one who left me with the Dursleys. A flicker of surprise crossed the old man's face. I see you're new, friends have been informative. He sighed heavily. Harry, while I understand you may have grievances about your upbringing, I must insist you return to Privet Drive immediately. It's for your own safety. No, Harry said, surprising himself with his firmness. I'm not going back there. I'm afraid you don't understand the complexities of the situation, Dumbledore continued, his voice kind but unyielding. There are protections at your aunt's house that keep you safe from those who would harm you. Safe? Harry repeated incredulously. I lived in a cupboard. They hated me. They called me a freak and told me my parents were drunks who died in a car crash. Dumbledore's expression tightened. That is, unfortunate. But physical comfort is secondary to survival, Harry. The blood protection your mother's sacrifice created, I wouldn't take another step if I were you, Headmaster. Addams stood in the doorway, still fully dressed despite the late hour. His usual jovial expression was nowhere to be seen, instead, his face held the cold calculation of a predator. Mr. Addams, Dumbledore nodded politely. I apologize for the intrusion, but this is a matter of magical security. Harry must return to his relatives. Must he? Gomez raised an eyebrow. According to whose authority? Because I've spent the evening reviewing both magical and mundane law regarding child welfare, and I'm quite certain breaking and entering to remove a child from a safe environment would constitute kidnapping under both systems. I am Harry's magical guardian, Dumbledore stated firmly. Ah yes, the guardianship you assigned to yourself as Chief Warlock, Gomez nodded. Very convenient. Tell me, does the Wisengamot know you've been using that authority to place the boy who lived in an abusive home with magic-hating muggles? Or that you've been managing his family's assets with no oversight? Or that you imprisoned his rightful godfather without trial? Dumbledore's eyes narrowed slightly. You are remarkably well informed for someone outside the magical community, Mr. Addams. The Addams family has always straddled many worlds, Headmaster. It gives us a unique perspective. Morticia had appeared beside her husband, her pale face luminous in the darkened room. And what we see from our perspective is a powerful wizard who has taken extraordinary liberties with an orphan child's life. My only concern has ever been Harry's safety, Dumbledore insisted. Safety from what, exactly? Gomez challenged. Voldemort is gone, by all accounts. And even if he weren't, surely there are magical families who could have protected Harry without mistreating him. Voldemort's followers remain, Dumbledore countered. And the blood protection at the Dursleys is unique, it can't be replicated elsewhere. Can't it? Morticia's smile held secrets. The protection comes from Lily Potter's sacrifice, does it not? A mother's love so powerful it shielded her son even after death. The Addams family has considerable experience with blood magic, Headmaster. We might surprise you. A tense silence filled the room as the two parties sized each other up. Harry watched with bated breath, afraid Dumbledore might simply wave his wand and force him to return to Privet Drive. Finally, Dumbledore spoke. What do you propose, then? A compromise, Gomez offered. Harry stays with us for now, under magical protections we'll establish to your satisfaction. Meanwhile, we begin formal proceedings to review his guardianship situation properly, with all evidence examined in the light of day. The magical community has its own ways of handling such matters, Dumbledore warned. Indeed it does, Gomez agreed cheerfully. And we'll respect those processes, right up until they fail to protect Harry's interests. At which point, we'll introduce them to Muggle family courts, international magical cooperation treaties, and a media campaign that would make Rita Skeeter look like an amateur. Dumbledore's eyes widened slightly. You wouldn't expose the wizarding world to Muggles. Not broadly, no, Morticia agreed. But selectively, to the right authorities. If necessary to protect a child. The statute of secrecy has exceptions, Headmaster. I believe imminent danger to a minor is one of them. Dumbledore studied them both for a long moment before turning to Harry. "Harry, I know this is confusing for you. But I have only ever acted with your best interests at heart." Harry met the old wizard's gaze steadily. "Then why didn't you ever check on me? Why didn't you see how they treated me?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. "The boy raises an excellent point," Gomez noted. "One of many we'll be exploring in the coming days." Dumbledore sighed deeply. "Very well. A temporary arrangement, while we sort this out properly. But I must insist on certain protective measures, which we'll discuss in detail." Gomez nodded. "Tomorrow. After you've made a proper appointment and entered our home through the front door, like a civilized wizard." For a moment, Harry thought Dumbledore might argue, but instead, the old man merely inclined his head slightly. "Until tomorrow, then. Good night, Harry." With a soft pop, Dumbledore vanished. "Can all wizards do that?" Harry asked, wide-eyed. "Apparition? Once they're trained, yes," Gomez confirmed. "Though doing it into someone's house without permission is considered both rude and a security breach." He sat on the edge of Harry's bed. "Sorry about the midnight drama, my boy. I suspected he might try something like this once he discovered you were missing." "How did he find me so quickly?" "An excellent question," Morticia mused. "One of many we'll need answers to." "Should I be worried?" Harry asked, suddenly uncertain again. He seemed very determined. "Albus Dumbledore is accustomed to getting his way," Gomez agreed. "But so am I. And I have something he doesn't." "What's that?" "A complete disregard for how things are supposed to be done," Gomez grinned wickedly. "The wizarding world has rules and traditions they consider inviolable. The Addams family has always seen rules as creative suggestions. Plus," Morticia added with a small smile, "we have Grandmama arriving tomorrow. Her perspective on blood protection should prove educational for the headmaster." "Is she a witch?" Harry asked. "Of the oldest kind," Gomez confirmed. "The kind that makes modern wizards nervous. Now, try to get some sleep, Harry. Tomorrow we begin our campaign in earnest." After they left, Harry lay awake for a while, processing the confrontation he'd witnessed. Dumbledore had seemed kind, concerned, even grandfatherly, but he'd also been immovable on sending Harry back to the Dursleys, despite knowing how they treated him. The Addams family, for all their strangeness, had stood their ground and protected him. For the first time in his life, Harry had adults fighting for him, not against him. That thought finally allowed him to drift back to sleep. The following morning brought chaos of the most organized kind. Harry awoke to find his room transformed. His few pitiful possessions had been arranged respectfully on a small table, while a wardrobe stood open revealing clothes that appeared to be his size, though in darker shades than he was used to. When he ventured downstairs, the Addams family's temporary London home buzzed with activity. Lurch moved efficiently through the halls carrying strange artifacts, while things scuttled about delivering messages. In the main sitting room, Gomez was simultaneously dictating to a floating quill, examining ancient-looking documents, and fencing with an invisible opponent. "Harry! Good morning," he exclaimed, not missing a beat in any of his activities. "Sleep well after our midnight visitor?" "Yes, thank you," Harry replied, watching in fascination as Gomez parried an unseen thrust. "What's happening?" "Preparations," Gomez announced. "Dumbledore will return, officially this time, and we must be ready. Cousin Itt is at the Ministry gathering records, Wednesday and Pugsley are helping Morticia prepare the protective rituals, and, perfect timing." The front door burst open with theatrical force, and a diminutive elderly woman entered. She wore layers of colorful, mismatched clothes, her wild gray hair stood out in all directions, and she carried a bag that emitted occasional growling sounds. "Grandmama!" Gomez greeted her enthusiastically, abandoning all his previous activities to embrace her. "You made excellent time. Would have been here sooner if customs hadn't insisted on checking my bag, the old woman grumbled. Apparently bringing pickled basilisk eyes into the country requires paperwork now. Regulations, regulations. She spotted Harry and her eyes lit up. So this is the boy. Let me look at you, child. Before Harry could respond, Grandmama had seized his chin and was turning his face from side to side, examining him with intense scrutiny. Undernourished. Magical core stunted but powerful. And this, her gnarled finger traced his lightning scar with surprising gentleness. Oh my. Oh my, indeed. What is it, Mama? Morticia asked, entering with Wednesday and Pugsley. Later, Grandmama said cryptically. First, this boy needs breakfast. Real breakfast, not that English nonsense with beans and tomatoes. He needs bone broth, swamp adder eggs, and my special growth tonic. I'm not sure, Harry began nervously. Trust Grandmama, Wednesday advised. Her food looks questionable and smells worse, but it works. Pugsley grew 3 inches after she fed him toad liver smoothies for a week. Best week of my life. Pugsley confirmed enthusiastically. Harry was saved from having to respond by the sound of the doorbell, a deep, sonorous gong that seemed to reverberate through the house's very foundations. Ah! Right on time. Gomez declared. Lurch, show our guest to the conservatory, would you? We'll conduct our negotiations among the carnivorous plants, they appreciate the entertainment. Lurch groaned his acknowledgement and lumbered toward the door. Harry, Morticia said gently, would you prefer to be present for this discussion, or would you rather explore the house with Wednesday and Pugsley? Harry considered this. Part of him wanted to hear what Dumbledore had to say, but another part was still processing everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. I think I'd like to stay, he decided. It's about me, after all. A wise decision, Gomez approved. Nothing builds character like watching adults argue over your future. To the conservatory. The conservatory was a glass-enclosed space filled with the strangest collection of plants Harry had ever seen. Some snapped at the air with toothy blooms, others slithered their vines across the floor like searching tentacles, and one particularly large specimen in the corner seemed to be humming a discordant tune. Dumbledore stood in the center of this botanical chaos, looking oddly at home despite his formal wizard's robes. He was not alone, beside him stood a severe-looking woman with her hair pulled into a tight bun, and on his other side, a tall black man with a single gold earring. Ah, the full diplomatic contingent. Gomez observed cheerfully. Headmaster Dumbledore, I presume these are your colleagues? Indeed, Dumbledore nodded. May I present Professor Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress of Hogwarts and Head of Gryffindor House, and Kingsley Shacklebolt of the Auror Office. Aurors? Grandmama cackled. Bringing law enforcement to a custody discussion. My, someone's feeling defensive. Standard procedure when a magical child is potentially at risk, Shacklebolt explained in a deep, calming voice. I'm here as a neutral party. How refreshing. Gomez exclaimed. And on our side, you've met my wife Morticia, our children Wednesday and Pugsley, my mother, known to all as Grandmama, and of course, Harry himself. McGonagall's eyes fixed on Harry, widening slightly. Mr. Potter, she said, her Scottish brogue becoming more pronounced with emotion. Are you well? Better than I was at the Dursleys, Harry answered honestly. McGonagall's lips thinned dangerously as she turned to Dumbledore. Albus, you assured me his placement was appropriate. Minerva, we've discussed this, Dumbledore replied quietly. The blood protection. Grandmama interrupted, moving forward with surprising agility. Let's talk about that, shall we? Because I've been reviewing your work, Dumbledore, and I have questions. I'm not sure who you are, madam, but the protective magic I established, Dumbledore began, is fundamentally sound in theory but sloppily executed in practice, Grandmama finished for him. Blood magic requires bonds of love to function properly. You placed the boy with people who resent his very existence. The protection has been degrading for years. A tense silence followed this pronouncement. Is this true, Albus? McGonagall demanded. The protection remains functional, Dumbledore insisted. Though perhaps not as robust as originally intended. Not as robust. Gomez repeated incredulously. The boy was sleeping in a cupboard under the stairs. Wearing rags. Half-starved. If that's your idea of functional protection, I'd hate to see your idea of neglect. The physical accommodations were, regrettable, Dumbledore conceded. But the priority was keeping Harry safe from Voldemort's followers. While exposing him to daily abuse from his supposed protectors, Morticia observed coldly. A curious calculus. Mr. Potter, Shacklebolt addressed Harry directly, his deep voice kind but professional. Could you tell us about your life with your relatives? Harry hesitated, uncomfortable with all these eyes on him. Wednesday moved slightly closer to him, her presence oddly reassuring. It's okay, she whispered. Tell the truth. They need to hear it. Harry took a deep breath and began to speak, about the cupboard, the hand-me-down clothes, the missed meals, the constant belittling, the punishments for accidental magic, the lies about his parents. He spoke without embellishment or self-pity, simply stating facts as he had experienced them. By the time he finished, McGonagall looked ready to transfigure someone into a toad, preferably Dumbledore. Even Shacklebolt's professional demeanor had hardened into something more dangerous. Albus, McGonagall's voice shook slightly, I told you they were the worst sort of muggles. I watched them for a day before you left Harry there. The blood protection required a blood relative, Dumbledore explained, though with less certainty than before. Nonsense. Grandmama declared. Blood protection requires blood, yes, but not necessarily blood relation. The magic comes from Lily Potter's sacrifice, her blood, her love, her magic. That protection lives in Harry himself, not in his aunt's reluctant charity. What are you suggesting? Shacklebolt asked. That the protection could be anchored elsewhere, Grandmama explained. To a place, to an object, even to people who genuinely care for the boy. The magic follows intent and bonds, not mere genetics. That's not conventional magical theory, Dumbledore objected. Conventional? Grandmama cackled. The Addams family hasn't been conventional since before your great-grandparents were born, Headmaster. We preserve knowledge others have forgotten or deliberately obscured. Knowledge that could protect Harry properly, Gomez added. Without condemning him to abuse. This is all very interesting theoretical discussion, Dumbledore conceded, but legally, I remain Harry's magical guardian, and, about that, Morticia interrupted smoothly. Cousin ITT has been making inquiries at the ministry. It seems there are irregularities in how that guardianship was established. Meaning? Shacklebolt asked, his aura instincts clearly engaged. Meaning that when Sirius Black was imprisoned without trial, the guardianship should have passed to the next named guardian in the Potter's will, Gomez explained. Except the will was sealed by executive order of the Wisengamot, an order signed by Chief Warlock Albus Dumbledore, before it could be properly executed. McGonagall gasped. Albus, is this true? It was a chaotic time, Dumbledore defended. Decisions had to be made quickly to ensure Harry's safety. And those decisions conveniently consolidated control of both Harry's person and his family's assets under your authority, Gomez noted. Quite the coincidence. I have never used the Potter family resources for personal gain, Dumbledore stated firmly. Perhaps not, Morticia agreed. But you have used them, and him, to advance your own agenda, whatever that may be. The conservatory fell silent except for the occasional snap of a carnivorous bloom. Harry watched the adults warily, feeling like a chess piece being fought over by opposing players. Finally, Shacklebolt spoke. This situation requires proper investigation. As an Auror, I can't ignore allegations of improper guardianship, sealed wills, and imprisonment without trial. Kingsley, Dumbledore began. No, Albus, Shacklebolt cut him off respectfully but firmly. This goes beyond Hogwarts business. If half of what I've heard today is accurate, there are serious questions that need answering. What do you propose? McGonagall asked. A formal hearing, Shacklebolt decided. Before the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, with representatives from Child Welfare Services. All evidence presented, all parties heard. We would welcome such a proceeding, Gomez agreed readily. Transparency is all we're asking for. And in the meantime? Dumbledore pressed. Harry's safety remains my primary concern. The boy stays with us, Grandmama stated flatly. I'll establish proper protections today, stronger than what you cobbled together, Dumbledore. I must insist on verifying these protections myself, Dumbledore countered. Of course, Morticia smiled thinly. We have nothing to hide. And I believe I should remain as a neutral observer during this transition period, Shacklebolt added. To ensure all parties' interests are properly represented. Splendid idea. Gomez clapped his hands together. We love guests. Lurch can prepare the East Wing for you, can't he, Quirrell? Certainly, Morticia nodded. Though Mr. Shacklebolt should be warned that the East Wing is occasionally visited by the spectre of despair. Nothing dangerous, mind you, just brings an overwhelming sense of existential dread between the hours of 2 and 4 a.m. Shacklebolt blinked but maintained his composure. I've faced Dementors. I imagine I can handle your spectre. I'd like to be involved as well, McGonagall interjected. As Harry's future head of house, I have a vested interest in his well-being. The more the merrier. Gomez declared. We'll make it a proper house party. With less emphasis on proper and more on party, naturally. Dumbledore looked like he wanted to object but found himself outmaneuvered. Very well. A formal hearing, with Harry remaining here under protective supervision until the matter is resolved. He turned to Harry directly. Harry, I hope you understand that everything I've done has been with your best interests at heart. Harry met the old wizard's eyes steadily. I think we might have different ideas about what's in my best interest, sir. Something like sorrow passed across Dumbledore's face. Perhaps we do. With the immediate confrontation diffused, arrangements were quickly made. Shacklebolt would stay as an observer, McGonagall would visit daily, and the hearing was scheduled for the following week. Dumbledore departed with obvious reluctance, while Grandmama immediately set about examining the house for optimal protection anchors. Well, Gomez said cheerfully once Dumbledore had gone, that went better than expected. No curses thrown, no ancient vendettas declared, practically civilized by Addams standards. The real battle is just beginning, Morticia cautioned. Dumbledore won't relinquish control easily. Nor should he, Gomez agreed, surprising Harry. A man who gives up without a fight isn't worth fighting in the first place. This will be glorious, Tish, a legal and magical duel for the ages. Harry looked between them uncertainly. Do you really think we can win? Win? Gomez repeated, kneeling to meet Harry's eyes. My dear boy, the Addams family doesn't simply play to win, we play to change the game entirely. By the time we're done, the very meaning of victory will be redefined. What Gomez means, Morticia translated with a fond smile, is that we have only just begun to fight for you, Harry. And an Addams never abandons their own. For the first time since this whirlwind began, Harry felt a certainty settling in his chest. Whatever happened next, whatever battles lay ahead, he wasn't facing them alone anymore. Chapter 2, Trial by Venom. The week leading up to the Ministry hearing passed in a whirlwind of activity that left Harry's head spinning. The Addams family didn't just prepare for battle, they reveled in it. Legal warfare. Gomez exclaimed over breakfast, stabbing a sausage with enough force to crack the plate beneath it. The most delicious kind. No bloodshed, but plenty of bloodless carnage. He sat at the head of a long dining table that had appeared overnight in what had previously been a modest breakfast nook. The entire room had transformed, growing more elaborate and macabre with each passing day, as if the house itself was absorbing the Addams family's essence. "Is the ministry really that dangerous?" Harry asked, cautiously poking at the viscous black substance Grandmama had ladled onto his plate. Despite its appearance, everything she'd fed him so far had tasted surprisingly good and left him feeling stronger. "Dangerous?" Gomez laughed. "My dear boy, it's bureaucracy, the most insidious danger of all. Rules stacked upon rules until the original purpose is forgotten. Perfect for exploitation by those who understand the game." "And do you understand the game?" Harry took a bite of the black goo and found it tasted like cinnamon and something deeper, earthier. "I understand that every game can be changed," Gomez winked, tossing a dagger at a nearby dartboard. It stuck perfectly in the bullseye. "The ministry expects traditional arguments about guardianship, custody rights, perhaps some tearful testimony. They don't expect the Addams approach." "Which is?" Harry prompted. Wednesday looked up from where she was meticulously dissecting a scorpion next to her cereal bowl. "Chaos, obviously." "Controlled chaos," Morticia corrected, gliding into the room with a bundle of dark roses. "There's an art to dismantling a system, Harry. Too little pressure, nothing changes. Too much, and they unite against the common threat. Like poking a hornet's nest with exactly the right-sized stick," Pugsley added cheerfully. Kingsley Shacklebolt, who'd been quietly observing from the far end of the table, cleared his throat. "As the ministry representative present, I feel compelled to point out that the Department of Magical Law Enforcement takes these proceedings very seriously." "Oh, we're counting on it." Gomez beamed, throwing another dagger. "Serious proceedings for serious allegations. Speaking of which, cousin Itt. Any news?" A familiar mass of hair appeared in the doorway, chittering excitedly. "The wills? Excellent. And Gringotts has agreed to send a representative? Perfect." Gomez clapped his hands together. The pieces assemble themselves. Harry glanced at Kingsley. "Can you understand what cousin Itt is saying?" "Not a word," Kingsley admitted. "Though I'm beginning to wonder if that's a shortcoming in my training." "It's all about listening with more than your ears," Grandmama cackled, appearing behind Kingsley so suddenly that the trained Auror nearly jumped. "The same way magic is about more than wands and incantations." She placed a gnarled hand on Harry's shoulder. "How's my potion settling, boy? Feel the warmth in your bones yet?" Harry nodded. He'd been feeling strange all week, not sick, exactly, but as if something long dormant was gradually awakening inside him. "Good." Grandmama approved. "Repairing a decade of nutritional neglect takes time, but we'll have you right as a freshly dug grave before Hogwarts starts." She shot a sour look at Kingsley. "No thanks to your ministry's oversight." Kingsley accepted the criticism with dignity. "If the allegations prove true, many systems have failed Mr. Potter." "Oh, they're true all right," Gomez declared, suddenly serious. "And more besides. Tish. The portfolios." Morticia produced a stack of elegant black leather folders, handing one to each person at the table. "What are these?" Harry asked, opening his to find parchment covered in elegant script. "Our evidence," Morticia explained. "Medical assessments from both magical and muggle physicians. Photographic documentation of your living conditions at the Dursleys. Financial records showing discrepancies in your family's accounts. Witness statements from neighbors who observed your treatment over the years." Harry stared at the folder in shock. "You got all this in a week?" "The Addams family has resources," Morticia said simply. "And motivation," Wednesday added, studying her own copy with clinical interest. "I've never seen such comprehensive psychological abuse outside of our family reunions. The difference being, of course, that we enjoy it." Kingsley looked increasingly troubled as he flipped through the pages. This is extensive and disturbing. He looked up at Gomez. You understand that presenting evidence collected through unconventional means may create procedural complications. Gomez waved the concern away. Everything obtained legally, if creatively. We simply asked questions no one had bothered to ask before. Amazing what people will share when properly motivated. By which he means financially compensated, not threatened, Morticia clarified, seeing Kingsley's expression. We save threats for special occasions. Like birthdays, Pugsley nodded. And anniversaries, Wednesday added. I remain concerned about tomorrow's proceedings, Professor McGonagall said as she entered the room, having arrived for her daily visit. Unlike Kingsley, she had declined to stay at the Addams residence, though she had taken to appearing at increasingly early hours. The Wisingamot is not known for its progressive views on child welfare, particularly when Albus is involved. Ah, Professor. Gomez greeted her enthusiastically. Just the witch we need. Tell me, how familiar are you with the exact wording of the Hogwarts Charter regarding the headmaster's responsibilities towards students? McGonagall's eyebrows rose. Quite familiar. Why? Because, Gomez's smile turned predatory, we're not just challenging Dumbledore's personal guardianship of Harry, we're challenging his institutional authority to make such decisions at all. The conversation dissolved into legal and magical technicalities that made Harry's head swim. He slipped away from the table, portfolio in hand, and wandered into the conservatory where he'd taken to spending quiet moments. Unlike most of the house, which grew more Gothic by the day, the conservatory had become almost welcoming, if you ignored the fact that most of the plants could kill you. Harry had discovered that if you showed no fear, the more aggressive specimens left you alone. It reminded him, oddly, of dealing with Dudley's gang. He sat on a wrought iron bench beneath a monstrous bloom that occasionally dripped something acidic and began leafing through the portfolio again. Seeing his life laid out in clinical detail made it both more and less real somehow. The photographs of his cupboard, the medical report detailing years of malnutrition, the testimonies from neighbors who had seen but never acted, it created a strange distance, as if these things had happened to someone else. It's odd, isn't it? Wednesday's voice came from beside him. Harry hadn't heard her approach. Seeing your suffering documented for strangers to evaluate. Yeah, Harry agreed, closing the folder. How do you always know what I'm thinking? I don't, Wednesday shrugged. I just understand what it's like to be different. To be seen as something other than human. The Dursleys did think I was a freak, Harry admitted. We're all freaks to someone, Wednesday said matter-of-factly. The difference is, we Addamses celebrate it. She gave him a rare, small smile. You should try it sometime. Being proud of what makes others afraid of you. I don't even know what that is yet, Harry sighed. Everyone keeps telling me I'm this important wizard who did something impossible, but I don't remember any of it. Then you'll have to find new impossible things to do, Wednesday suggested. Starting with making the Ministry of Magic bend to the will of a 10-year-old boy. Harry laughed despite himself. When you put it that way, it sounds ridiculous. Most revolutions do, until they succeed. She stood abruptly. Come on. Mother wants you fitted for proper robes. We can't have you looking like a vagrant when we storm the ministry. The morning of the hearing arrived with thunderous skies that seemed appropriate for the occasion. Harry woke to find a set of robes laid out for him, not the traditional wizard robes he'd glimpsed in books around the house, but something that seemed designed specifically to straddle the line between magical and mundane. The fabric was deep green with subtle silver embroidery at the collar and cuffs, cut in a style that could pass for an unusual suit in the Muggle world. The color complements your eyes, Morticia explained when he joined the family for breakfast. And more importantly, subconsciously aligns you with Slytherin House in the minds of the traditionalists, without being so obvious that Dumbledore's faction can object. Slytherin? Harry asked, still learning the basics of Hogwarts. Cunning, ambition, self-preservation, Gomez declared proudly. Fine qualities, though I myself was a Hufflepuff during my brief exchange year at Hogwarts. You attended Hogwarts? Harry asked, surprised. For 3 glorious months before they asked me to leave. Something about unsafe experimentation and concerning influence on the castle's architecture. He sighed nostalgically. I've always suspected the 3rd-floor corridor shifted permanently to the left because of that last experiment. Focus, darling, Morticia reminded him. Today is about Harry, not your educational escapades. Right you are, Tish. Gomez agreed, instantly back on task. Now, Harry, today will be chaotic, political, and potentially hostile. The Ministry will try to intimidate you, Dumbledore will attempt to appear as the reasonable authority figure, and various factions will see you as either a symbol or a pawn. Or both, Wednesday added helpfully. What should I do? Harry asked nervously. Be yourself, Morticia advised. Your honest experience is our strongest weapon. When asked directly, speak your truth without embellishment or apology. And remember, Grandmama added, adjusting Harry's collar, you're not walking in there alone. You have the Addams family behind you, and we've been terrifying authorities since before the Ministry of Magic existed. Their confidence was contagious. Harry felt his nervousness transforming into something more like determination. Traveling to the Ministry proved to be an adventure in itself. Gomez had rejected the standard wizard transportation methods, flow powder. And ruin these suits with soot? Never. In favor of the family's hearse, now enchanted with what appeared to be several illegal modifications. Strictly speaking, the hover charm on vehicles is somewhat regulated, Gomez admitted as the car rose 6 inches off the ground. But we're not technically in Britain's magical jurisdiction, being American citizens. That's not exactly how international magical law works, Kingsley observed from the back seat, looking increasingly resigned to his role as helpless observer. International magical law is precisely what we're counting on. Gomez exclaimed cheerfully. The British wizarding community has become dangerously insular since Grindelwald's defeat, forgotten that they're part of a global magical community with different standards and oversight. The drive to central London was mercifully quick, thanks to the hearse's ability to slip between, and occasionally over, traffic. They parked directly in front of the visitors' entrance to the Ministry, a dilapidated phone booth that looked like it hadn't worked in decades. Charming, Morticia observed. Such commitment to decay. I've arranged for a more appropriate entrance, Gomez announced. Ah, perfect timing. A sleek black car had pulled up behind them, and from it emerged a familiar blonde-haired mass, Cousin ITT, now dressed in what appeared to be a formal diplomatic uniform complete with medals and sash. What's happening? Harry whispered to Wednesday. Cousin ITT holds diplomatic status in 17 magical nations, she explained quietly. Not Britain, which has repeatedly denied his credentials, but that's actually better for us today. Better how? Because, Gomez interrupted, overhearing, it means we enter as an official diplomatic delegation under protest, invoking the International Confederation of Wizards Diplomatic Protection Act of 1743. We bypass the visitors' check-in, maintain our wands, and most importantly, make a scene. Harry had never seen Kingsley look so alarmed. Mr. Addams, that treaty is for genuine diplomatic emergencies, is the welfare of the boy who lived not an emergency of international magical significance? Morticia asked smoothly. After all, his defeat of Voldemort affected magical security worldwide. Kingsley opened his mouth, closed it, then simply shook his head in defeat. What followed was unlike anything Harry could have imagined. Cousin ITT led the procession, his high-pitched chatter somehow taking on an official, demanding tone. Ministry workers scattered before them, staring in confusion as the strange procession made its way directly to the elevators without stopping at security. Diplomatic delegation. Gomez announced grandly whenever anyone tried to intercede. Here for the Potter guardianship hearing. Step aside in the name of international magical cooperation. Harry walked between Morticia and Grandmama, with Wednesday and Pugsley flanking them like solemn guards. He noticed people stopping to stare, whispers following in their wake. Many eyes fixed on his forehead, and he was suddenly grateful that Morticia had styled his hair to partially conceal his scar. "They're looking at you like you're a zoo exhibit," Wednesday observed quietly. "I'm used to being stared at," Harry replied. "Just not for this reason." "Embrace it," Pugsley suggested from his other side. "I like to make the most disturbing face I can when people stare. Keeps them guessing." "Perhaps save that technique for after we've secured custody," Morticia suggested diplomatically. The courtroom was already nearly full when they arrived. Unlike the modern Muggle courts Harry had glimpsed on television, this room was ancient, circular, with tiered stone seating rising around a central floor. Torches burned in brackets along the walls, and the ceiling was enchanted to look like storm clouds gathering. At the highest point sat an imposing witch with a monocle and a severe expression, flanked by wizards and witches in plum-colored robes. Dumbledore was among them, though not in the central position Harry had expected. "Interesting," Gomez murmured. "He's recused himself from the chief warlock position for this hearing. A tactical move, trying to appear less threatening." On the main floor, several tables had been arranged. Dumbledore's supporters sat at one, including Professor McGonagall, who gave Harry an encouraging nod. Another table appeared to be for ministry officials, looking officious with stacks of parchment. A third, smaller table stood empty, presumably for the Addams family. But Gomez ignored this designated space completely. With a flick of his wand, he conjured an elaborate black table inlaid with silver directly in the center of the floor, with high-backed chairs that looked more like thrones than courtroom furniture. A murmur of disapproval rippled through the room. Mr. Addams, the severe witch with the monocle, called out, "There are appropriate procedures for courtroom arrangements." "Madam Bones," Gomez bowed flamboyantly, "a pleasure to meet the esteemed head of magical law enforcement. We are simply exercising our right as diplomatic representatives to maintain cultural dignity in foreign proceedings." "You are not recognized diplomatic representatives," a toad-like woman in pink simpered from near Bones. "This display is highly irregular." "Irregularity is precisely why we're here, madam." Morticia let the question hang. "Undersecretary Dolores Umbridge," the woman replied with forced sweetness. "Undersecretary Umbridge," Morticia nodded graciously. "We're here because of irregularities in Harry Potter's placement, irregularities in his treatment, and irregularities in the administration of his family's estate. If the ministry wished for regular proceedings, perhaps it should have ensured regular adherence to magical law in the first place." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Gomez beamed at his wife with undisguised adoration. "Magnificent, Tish. Legal parrying at its finest." "If we could proceed to the matter at hand," Madam Bones interrupted firmly. "This hearing is to evaluate the guardianship situation of Harry James Potter, currently contested between his magical guardian Albus Dumbledore and—" She consulted a parchment with a frown, "the Addams family, who claim no legal relationship but assert protective interest." "A correction, if I may," Gomez interjected smoothly. "We contest the very validity of Albus Dumbledore's guardianship, not merely his execution of those duties." Another murmur rippled through the courtroom. Harry noticed several reporters scribbling furiously in the gallery, including a blonde woman with jeweled spectacles who looked particularly predatory. "On what grounds?" Madam Bones asked. "On the grounds that it was established through procedural manipulation rather than proper legal channels," Gomez replied. "Specifically, the sealing of James and Lily Potter's will before its provisions could be executed, the imprisonment of Sirius Black without trial, and the assignment of guardianship powers to Dumbledore in his capacity as chief warlock rather than through family court proceedings." The murmur became a rumble. Dumbledore's face remained impassive, but Harry thought he detected a tightening around the old wizard's eyes. "These are serious allegations," Madam Bones stated. "Do you have evidence to support them?" "We do," Morticia confirmed, signaling to cousin Itt, who produced a large portfolio. including the original wills, retrieved from Gringotts archives through appropriate legal channels. This caused an outright commotion. Madame Bones banged a gavel for order. The Potters' wills were sealed by Wizengamot order for national security, Umbridge objected. An order that Gringotts, as a sovereign goblin nation, is not obligated to recognize, Gomez countered. Particularly when presented with evidence that the sealing may have been improper. A goblin Harry hadn't noticed before stepped forward from the gallery. Gringotts Bank has reviewed the matter and found procedural irregularities sufficient to warrant limited disclosure to interested parties under the Treaty of 1752, Section 14, Paragraph 3, regarding orphaned heirs of noble houses. Harry watched this verbal sparring with growing fascination. It was like watching a complex game where he couldn't quite grasp all the rules, but he understood the stakes all too well. "We will review this evidence," Madame Bones decided after conferring briefly with her colleagues. "However, before delving into these technical matters, I believe we should hear from Mr. Potter himself regarding his current situation and preferences." All eyes turned to Harry, who suddenly felt his throat go dry. Morticia laid a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Remember," she whispered. "Your truth. Nothing more, nothing less." Harry nodded and stood, approaching the small witness podium that had appeared in the center of the room. From this position, he could see the full Wizengamot arrayed before him, their faces ranging from curious to sympathetic to overtly hostile. "Mr. Potter," Madame Bones addressed him directly, her voice softer than it had been previously. "Could you tell us about your life with your aunt and uncle, the Dursleys?" Harry took a deep breath and began speaking. He described the cupboard under the stairs, the hand-me-down clothes, the endless chores, the meager meals, the punishments for accidental magic, the lies about his parents. As with his first recounting to the Addamses, he didn't embellish or seek sympathy, he simply stated facts as he had experienced them. The courtroom grew increasingly still as he spoke. By the time he finished describing how Dudley had received 38 birthday presents while he got a coat hanger, several Wizengamot members looked physically ill. "And you were never visited by any magical authorities during this time?" Madame Bones asked. "No welfare checks? No contact from your guardian?" "No, ma'am," Harry replied. "I didn't even know magic existed until the Addams family told me. My aunt and uncle said my parents died in a car crash, and that my father was unemployed and my mother was." He hesitated, glancing at Dumbledore, worthless. A low, angry murmur swept through the courtroom. McGonagall looked ready to transform into her cat form and claw someone's eyes out. "And how would you describe your week with the Addams family in comparison?" Madame Bones continued. Harry couldn't help the small smile that formed. "They've been brilliant. They've explained about magic and my parents. Grandmama's been giving me potions to help with the effects of living with the Dursleys. Wednesday and Pugsley have been teaching me about magical creatures. They even gave me my own room with a real bed. Have you felt safe with them?" Madame Bones pressed. Harry considered this carefully. The Addams home was filled with things most people would consider dangerous: carnivorous plants, weapons on the walls, the occasional explosion from Pugsley's experiments. Yet paradoxically, he'd never felt safer. "Yes," he said firmly. "They're different, but they've been honest with me and treated me like I matter." A wizard from the ministry table stood. "If I may, Madame Bones. While Mr. Potter's testimony is compelling, children often lack the perspective to understand what's best for them. Professor Dumbledore placed him with his blood relatives for important magical protection, the famous blood protection." Grandmama cackled, rising from her seat with surprising agility. "I wondered when we'd get to that fairy tale." "Madam," the ministry wizard bristled, "the protective enchantments placed on the Dursley residents are well-documented magical theory, yes," Grandmama interrupted. "And poorly executed theory at that. May I approach the evidence table?" After receiving a nod from Madame Bones, Grandmama hobbled forward, producing what appeared to be a small silver instrument from her voluminous robes. She placed it on the table and tapped it with a gnarled finger. The device sprang to life, projecting a glowing image that looked like intricate, interwoven strands of light. "This is a magical aura map," she explained, her voice suddenly taking on a professorial tone that surprised Harry. "It shows the protective magic currently surrounding Harry Potter. Notice the fragmentation here, and here." She pointed to areas where the light strands appeared frayed. Blood protection magic requires positive emotional bonds to maintain integrity. The Dursleys' treatment of the boy has been actively degrading the protection for years. Dumbledore finally spoke, his voice calm but carrying clearly through the chamber. "The protection, while perhaps weakened, remains functional. It has kept Harry safe from Voldemort's followers for 10 years. Several people flinched at the name. Harry noted that Dumbledore didn't directly dispute Grandmama's assessment of the magic's degradation. "Safe from Death Eaters, perhaps," Morticia observed coolly, "but not from the Dursleys themselves. A curious definition of protection, Headmaster, that preserves life while allowing the spirit to be crushed." "And there's another consideration," Gomez added, signaling to Thing, who had somehow managed to smuggle himself into the courtroom in Pugsley's pocket. Thing scurried across the floor carrying a small vial, drawing gasps and murmurs from the assembly. "Harry has undergone a complete medical examination by both magical and muggle physicians. The results are troubling. A healer from St. Mungo's was called to review the findings." Her increasingly grim expression as she studied the documents spoke volumes. "These results indicate long-term malnutrition, untreated injuries, and..." She hesitated, looking at Harry with undisguised concern, "an unusual magical anomaly centered on Mr. Potter's scar." This caused an immediate stir in the courtroom. Dumbledore rose swiftly. "That particular matter falls under the national security concerns I mentioned earlier," he stated firmly. "It is not relevant to this guardianship hearing." "On the contrary," Gomez countered. "It speaks directly to the quality of care Harry has received under your guardianship. If this anomaly has existed for 10 years without treatment or investigation, it represents yet another failure of duty." The courtroom had become a barely controlled chaos of whispers and exclamations. Harry noticed a platinum-blonde man in expensive robes watching the proceedings with calculating interest from the gallery. Beside him sat a boy about Harry's age who looked like his miniature clone. "Order!" Madame Bones called, banging her gavel. "This hearing will remain focused on the matter of guardianship. The medical evidence regarding Mr. Potter's general health is admissible, but speculation about his scar falls outside our current scope." Gomez bowed elegantly, though Harry could tell he was pleased with the reaction he provoked. "Of course, Madame Bones. We merely wish to establish a pattern of neglect that extends beyond the Dursleys to the magical authorities responsible for Harry's welfare." As the hearing progressed, Harry found himself increasingly amazed by the Addams family's preparation. For every argument Dumbledore's supporters raised, they had a counter ready. When financial questions arose regarding Harry's support, Cousin Itt produced Gringotts records showing regular withdrawals from the Potter vaults designated for the minor's care, money that had clearly never reached Harry. When questions about alternative placements came up, Morticia smoothly presented a magical lineage chart showing that, surprisingly, she had a distant connection to the Black family, giving their home a tenuous but legitimate blood link that could anchor protective magic. Throughout it all, Harry noticed Dumbledore remained largely silent, allowing his supporters to argue on his behalf while he observed with an inscrutable expression. It was a strategy Harry recognized from his years with the Dursleys, the appearance of being above the fray while others did the dirty work. The blonde reporter with the jeweled glasses had somehow migrated closer to the proceedings, her quill scratching furiously across parchment without her touching it. When she caught Harry looking at her, she gave him a predatory smile that made him instinctively move closer to Wednesday. "Rita Skeeter," Wednesday murmured, following his gaze. "Mother says she's a beetle in human form, both literally and figuratively." "Literally?" Harry whispered back. "Unregistered animagus," Wednesday explained quietly. "Cousin Itt has files on everyone interesting. Before Harry could ask more about this revelation, the doors to the courtroom burst open dramatically. A man with long platinum blonde hair strode in, leaning on a silver-headed cane. The same man Harry had noticed in the gallery earlier. "My apologies for the interruption," he announced in a cultured drawl. "Lucius Malfoy, representing the Hogwarts Board of Governors. We've just held an emergency session regarding these troubling allegations." "Mr. Malfoy," Madame Bones acknowledged with visible reluctance. "The board has no standing in this guardianship matter." "Perhaps not directly," Malfoy agreed smoothly, "but when accusations are made that the headmaster of Hogwarts has failed in his duty to a magical child, particularly one of Mr. Potter's significance, the board has legitimate concerns about administrative judgment." Harry watched Dumbledore's face carefully during this interruption. For the first time, he saw the old wizard's composure slip slightly, a flash of something, irritation, concern, crossing his features. Gomez clapped his hands together delightedly. "Wonderful. Another interested party joins our little drama. Tell me, Mr. Malfoy, what is the board's position on headmasters who place famous orphans with magic-hating relatives and then fail to check on their welfare for a decade?" Malfoy's smile was shark-like. "The board is deeply concerned by these allegations. If substantiated, they would raise serious questions about administrative fitness." The political maneuvering was becoming clearer to Harry. Malfoy wasn't concerned about his welfare, he was using the situation to undermine Dumbledore. Yet another adult seeing Harry as a means to an end. Grandmama seemed to sense his discomfort. She leaned over and whispered, "Politics make strange bedfellows, boy. Sometimes you need a snake to catch a rat." The hearing continued with Malfoy occasionally interjecting pointed questions that further complicated Dumbledore's position. The evidence mounted: neglect, financial irregularities, procedural violations in establishing guardianship, the unexplained imprisonment of Harry's godfather without trial, and the questionable effectiveness of the blood protection. Finally, after what felt like hours, Madame Bones called for a recess so the Wisengamot could deliberate. The Addams family whisked Harry to a private antechamber where Grandmama immediately produced a flask of something smoking and purple. "Drink," she commanded. "Magical courts drain your energy whether you notice it or not." Harry obeyed, finding the liquid tasted like hot chocolate despite its alarming appearance. Warmth spread through him instantly. "You did magnificently," Morticia assured him, adjusting his collar with gentle fingers. "Your composure spoke volumes." "I didn't really do anything," Harry shrugged. "Just told the truth." "The truth is a weapon few know how to wield properly," Gomez declared, pacing the room energetically. "You wielded it like a master swordsman. Did you see Dumbledore's face when you mentioned never receiving any magical visitors? Priceless." "What happens now?" Harry asked, trying to temper his hopes. Years with the Dursleys had taught him that nothing good came without a catch. "Now we wait for the Wisengamot's decision," Gomez explained, checking his unusual pocket watch. "They'll either rule immediately on temporary custody while investigating further, or they'll—" A knock at the door interrupted him. Kingsley Shacklebolt entered, his expression carefully neutral. "They're ready to announce their decision," he informed them. "And—" he hesitated, "you should prepare yourselves." The deliberations were contentious. They returned to find the courtroom significantly more crowded than before, word having spread about the sensational proceedings. Harry spotted more reporters, ministry officials who hadn't been present earlier, and curious onlookers straining for a glimpse of the famous boy who lived and the eccentric family championing his cause. Madame Bones called for order, the sharp rap of her gavel cutting through the murmurs. "After reviewing the evidence presented today, the Wisengamot has reached a preliminary decision regarding the guardianship of Harry James Potter," she announced formally. "This is not a final determination but a temporary arrangement pending further investigation." Harry held his breath, feeling Wednesday's hand slip into his, a gesture of support he hadn't expected from the solemn girl. "The evidence of Mr. Potter's mistreatment while under the care of his Muggle relatives is concerning and requires further examination," Madame Bones continued. Similarly, questions regarding the establishment of Albus Dumbledore's magical guardianship warrant deeper investigation, particularly in light of the newly accessible will documents. She paused, surveying the silent courtroom. Therefore, it is the decision of this body that Harry Potter shall remain temporarily in the custody of the Addams family, under the supervision of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, until a complete investigation can be conducted and a final hearing held. Relief flooded through Harry, so intense he felt momentarily dizzy. The Addams family reacted with characteristic flair. Gomez leapt to his feet with a cheer, Morticia allowed a small, satisfied smile, Grandmama cackled triumphantly, and Pugsley set off a small firecracker he'd somehow smuggled into the courtroom. However, Madame Bones continued firmly, silencing the celebrations, this custody comes with conditions. First, magical protections equivalent to those at the Dursley residence must be established and verified by ministry experts. Second, Mr. Potter must remain in Britain, accessible for further hearings and investigations. Third, his preparation for Hogwarts must continue unimpeded. We accept these conditions wholeheartedly, Gomez declared, bowing dramatically. Harry's safety and education are our paramount concerns. Dumbledore rose from his seat, his face composed once more. If I may, Madame Bones. While I respect the Wisengamot's decision, I must emphasize the importance of maintaining certain protective measures around Mr. Potter. I would request regular access to verify these protections myself, given my unique understanding of the magic involved. Madame Bones considered this. Weekly inspections by both yourself and a neutral ministry representative would seem appropriate, Headmaster. Delightful. Gomez clapped. We love visitors. Though I should warn you, Headmaster, the third Thursday of every month is reserved for séance night. The spirits get terribly upset if their summoning is interrupted. A ripple of uncertain laughter moved through the courtroom. Harry couldn't tell if Gomez was joking or not. One final matter, Madame Bones added. Given the concerns raised about Mr. Potter's godfather, Sirius Black, the Department of Magical Law Enforcement will open a review of his case. If procedural irregularities are confirmed, a formal trial may be required. This announcement caused an explosion of whispers throughout the chamber. Harry saw Dumbledore exchange a significant look with a grizzled, magical-eyed man at the back of the room. Court is adjourned until further notice, Madame Bones declared, bringing down her gavel with finality. The aftermath was chaos. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions at Harry and the Addamses. Ministry officials clustered in urgent discussion. Dumbledore's supporters gathered around him, their expressions ranging from concern to outright hostile as they glanced toward Harry. Come, Harry, Morticia said calmly, placing a protective hand on his shoulder. We've made our point for today. Now we make our exit, with dignity. And style. Gomez added, twirling his mustache. Lurch brought the car around to the main entrance. Nothing says victory like departing in a hearse. They moved as a unit, the Addams family forming a protective circle around Harry as they navigated the crowd. Cousin Itt chattered authoritatively, somehow clearing a path. Thing rode on Harry's shoulder, occasionally making rude gestures at particularly aggressive reporters. As they passed Lucius Malfoy, the aristocratic wizard inclined his head slightly. Mr. Potter. I look forward to seeing how this unusual situation develops. My son Draco will be in your year at Hogwarts. He indicated the platinum-blonde boy beside him, who regarded Harry with undisguised curiosity. That's nice, Harry replied neutrally, sensing complex currents he didn't yet understand. The Malfoys were on the wrong side of the last war, Wednesday whispered as they continued walking. But they're useful when their interests align with yours. How do you know so much about wizarding politics? Harry asked. Wednesday shrugged. I read. And listen. People say more when they think children aren't paying attention. They had almost reached the exit when Dumbledore appeared before them, seemingly out of nowhere. Harry, he said gently. A moment, if I may. The Addams family tensed around him, but Harry nodded. After all that had happened, he wanted to hear what the headmaster had to say. "I understand you feel I've failed you," Dumbledore said quietly. "Perhaps in some ways, I have. But please believe that everything I've done has been to keep you safe from dangers you don't yet understand." "With respect, Headmaster," Harry replied, finding confidence he hadn't known he possessed, "I understand what it's like to live in a cupboard while people who should protect me look the other way. If there are other dangers, maybe you should have told me about them instead of leaving me in the dark." Something like regret flickered across Dumbledore's face. "You are very much your mother's son, Harry. She too valued harsh truths over comfortable illusions." He stepped aside. "We will speak again soon." As they finally exited into the Ministry atrium, Harry felt lighter than he had in years, perhaps ever. For the first time, he had spoken his truth and been heard. The system that had failed him was being forced to acknowledge that failure. "Well?" Gomez asked as they climbed into the waiting hearse. "How does it feel to shake the foundations of Wizarding Britain before even starting school?" Harry considered this as Lurch pulled the vehicle smoothly away from the curb, drawing stares from passing wizards and muggles alike. "Weird," he admitted honestly. "But good weird. Like when Wednesday showed me how to feed the carnivorous orchids." "The best kind of weird," Pugsley nodded approvingly. "This is just the beginning, my boy," Gomez declared, enthusiasm undimmed. The hearing was the opening move in a much larger game. Dumbledore won't surrender easily, the Ministry will investigate reluctantly, and various factions will try to use you for their own ends. "That sounds exhausting," Harry sighed. "It would be, if you faced it alone," Morticia observed. "But you won't." Harry looked around at this strange family who had upended his world in the most wonderful way, Gomez with his boundless energy and strategic mind, Morticia with her quiet strength and protective instincts, Grandmama with her ancient knowledge and healing potions, Wednesday and Pugsley with their matter-of-fact acceptance of him. For the first time in his life, Harry Potter wasn't facing the world alone. And that made all the difference. "I suppose I should write to the Dursleys," he said suddenly. "Let them know I won't be coming back." "Oh, I think they've already received that message," Grandmama cackled mysteriously. Harry raised an eyebrow. "What did you do?" "Nothing permanent," Morticia assured him. "Though Pugsley did leave a few of his pet spiders in your cousin's room. The expanding kind," Pugsley added with a wicked grin. "And I may have had a word with your uncle about his blood pressure," Grandmama smirked. "Suggested he might experience some interesting symptoms if he ever mistreated another child. We Addamses believe in justice," Gomez explained cheerfully. "Not revenge." "Well, not just revenge." Harry found himself laughing, a genuine, carefree laugh that felt foreign in his throat. "I wish I could see their faces when the spiders start growing." "That's the spirit." Gomez approved. "Now, we have preparations to make. Hogwarts letters will be arriving soon, school supplies to purchase, and of course, we need to redecorate your room properly. What are your thoughts on a bat sanctuary in the corner? They make excellent alarm clocks." As the hearse weaved through London traffic, occasionally rising a few inches to pass over particularly congested areas, Harry felt a strange new emotion taking root: belonging. Not just acceptance or tolerance, but true belonging. The wizarding world might see him as the boy who lived, a symbol or a curiosity. Dumbledore might see him as a piece in some greater game. But the Addams family simply saw him as Harry, worthy of protection, worthy of fighting for, worthy of a place in their peculiar world. For now, that was enough. The headlines the next morning were everything Gomez could have hoped for and more. Cousin ITT arrived at breakfast with an armful of newspapers from both magical and muggle publications, spreading them across the table with evident satisfaction. "Boy who lived rescued from abusive muggles," screamed the Daily Prophet's front page, beneath a moving photograph of Harry walking between Morticia and Gomez, looking small but determined. Dumbledore's judgment questioned, Potter placement disaster, declared another magical newspaper. Even the Muggle papers had picked up a version of the story, though with supernatural elements removed. Famous American family adopts neglected British orphan in custody battle, magnificent. Gomez declared, spreading his arms wide. Public opinion is the current that moves the ship of state, Harry. And right now, that current is flowing decisively in our direction. Harry picked up the Daily Prophet with trepidation, scanning the article by Rita Skeeter. In a shocking turn of events that has rocked the wizarding world, Harry Potter, the boy who lived, has been removed from his Muggle relatives amid disturbing evidence of neglect and mistreatment. The emergency hearing yesterday revealed that the famous orphan, who vanquished you-know-who as an infant, has spent the last decade living in a cupboard under the stairs, dressed in rags, and denied knowledge of his magical heritage. Even more disturbing are questions surrounding Albus Dumbledore's role in this tragic situation. As the self-appointed magical guardian who placed young Harry with his magic-hating relatives, the esteemed headmaster of Hogwarts now faces uncomfortable scrutiny. Did the greatest wizard of our time knowingly leave our savior in an abusive home? And if so, why? The evidence suggests a pattern of control and manipulation that frankly disturbs me, said Lucius Malfoy, speaking for the Hogwarts Board of Governors. If these allegations are proven true, serious questions must be asked about administrative judgment and fitness. Young Harry has been temporarily placed with the Addams family, eccentric American relatives with distant ties to the Black family, who discovered his plight by chance and immediately took action. The article continued for several more paragraphs, growing increasingly speculative about Dumbledore's motives and painting the Addams family as heroic rescuers, though with pointed references to their unconventional magical practices and questionable associations. "She's certainly thorough," Harry observed, putting down the paper. "Though I don't remember anyone mentioning a connection to the Black family during the hearing." "A minor embellishment," Morticia smiled. "Our family tree does intersect with the Blacks several generations back, though not in a way the traditional wizarding genealogists would recognize. Something involving a cursed music box, a forbidden wedding, and 3 disappearing cousins." "The point is," Gomez said, buttering his toast with characteristic enthusiasm, "we've shifted the narrative. No longer is Harry Potter the untouchable boy who lived under Dumbledore's wise protection. Now he's the neglected child failed by the system, championed by outsiders who aren't afraid to challenge the establishment." "And that helps, how?" Harry asked, still learning to follow Gomez's strategic thinking. "It creates space for change," Wednesday explained, meticulously dissecting a blood orange. "When people believe in a story, they resist anything that challenges it. Now they're questioning the old story, which makes them more open to a new one." "Our story," Pugsley added. "Harry's story," Morticia corrected gently. "We're merely supporting characters in his journey." Harry felt a rush of gratitude toward these people who had so thoroughly upended his life. "I don't even know what my story is supposed to be. That's the beauty of it," Gomez exclaimed. "You get to discover it as you go. The greatest adventures are the ones without predetermined endings." Their philosophical breakfast was interrupted by the arrival of an elegant owl, swooping through the open window to land precisely in front of Harry. Tied to its leg was an envelope made of yellowish parchment, addressed in emerald green ink, "Mr. H. Potter, the Green Bedroom 13, Shadowcrest Lane, London." "Ah." Gomez clapped delightedly. "Right on schedule. Your Hogwarts letter, Harry. The formal invitation to join the magical world." Harry carefully untied the letter from the patient owl's leg. The envelope was heavy and thick, sealed with purple wax bearing a coat of arms, a lion, an eagle, a badger, and a snake surrounding a large letter H. Breaking the seal with trembling fingers, Harry pulled out the letter and read, "Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry Headmaster, Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Source, CHF, Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confeed, of Wizards. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have a place at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on September 1st. We await your owl by no later than July 31st. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall Deputy Headmistress. A second page listed required supplies, robes, books, a wand, a cauldron, and various other magical items Harry could hardly imagine. It's real, he whispered. I'm really going to learn magic. Of course you are. Gomez declared. You're a wizard, Harry. Magic is your birthright. Though perhaps not quite the way Hogwarts teaches it, Grandmama muttered. All those wand movements and Latin phrases. In my day, we used blood and bone and moonlight. Mother, Morticia interjected smoothly, let's not overwhelm Harry with too many magical traditions at once. Hogwarts will provide an excellent foundation, which we can supplement with more interesting instruction during holidays, Wednesday added with a rare smile that somehow managed to be both sincere and slightly disturbing. We should respond immediately, Morticia suggested, producing a piece of parchment and an elegant quill from a nearby drawer. And then prepare for a shopping expedition to Diagon Alley. Diagon Alley? Harry asked. The Wizarding Shopping District in London, Gomez explained. Hidden from Muggle eyes, of course. Fascinating place, though not nearly enough establishments catering to the darker arts these days. Regulation has really stifled innovation in cursed objects. Harry carefully composed his acceptance letter, still half expecting to wake up in his cupboard at any moment. When he finished, the owl took the response and soared back through the window. Now, Gomez said, rubbing his hands together eagerly, to Diagon Alley. Lurch, bring the car around. Today, Harry Potter officially enters the wizarding world, with the Addams family at his side. What could possibly go wrong? As if in answer, the fireplace suddenly erupted in green flames, causing Harry to jump back in alarm. A tall, red-headed man with thinning hair and a harried expression stepped out, brushing soot from his shabby robes. Mr. Addams. Mrs. Addams. Arthur Weasley, Department of Magical Law Enforcement, Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office. I'm afraid there's been a complaint about an illegally enchanted Muggle vehicle being operated in London yesterday. Something about a flying hearse. Gomez's face lit up with delight. Marvelous. Our first wizarding citation. Tish, this calls for a celebration. Morticia smiled indulgently at her husband's enthusiasm. Mr. Weasley, would you care for some tea while we discuss this matter? Perhaps Grandmama's special blend? Arthur Weasley looked increasingly confused as Gomez began enthusiastically questioning him about the exact regulations they'd violated and whether there were any interesting loopholes. Harry sat back, watching this new chaos unfold with a growing sense of contentment. If this was his new normal, magical letters, flying cars, and adults who found joy in the unconventional, he could definitely get used to it. After Mr. Weasley departed, with a warning, a confiscated hover charm, and inexplicably, a mechanical toy octopus Pugsley had pressed upon him, for experimental purposes, the Addams family prepared for their expedition to Diagon Alley. Harry's excitement mounted as Gomez outlined their approach. We'll make an entrance, naturally, he declared, adjusting his bow tie in the hallway mirror, which offered unsolicited fashion advice in a bored voice. The wizarding public is expecting to see their hero emerge with his new champions. We won't disappoint them. Perhaps we should consider a more subdued approach? Morticia suggested gently. Harry may not be prepared for the attention his appearance in Diagon Alley will generate. Harry appreciated her concern but shook his head. After yesterday, I think the secret's out anyway. And if I'm going to be stared at, I'd rather have you all with me than face it alone. That's the spirit. Gomez approved. Face the circus with your own ringmaster. Now, regarding funds, I don't have any money, Harry admitted, embarrassed. For school supplies, I mean. My dear boy. Gomez looked genuinely shocked. You have a vault at Gringotts. Several, in fact, according to the financial records cousin Itt uncovered. The Potters were an old, wealthy family. Harry stared at him. I do. They were. Indeed. Another detail your magical guardian neglected to mention, Gomez said, his cheerful tone gaining a sharp edge. No matter. Today we'll visit Gringotts, establish your access to your inheritance, and begin your education in financial management. Never too early to learn about compound interest and investment strategies. Harry's head spun with this new information. Not only was he a wizard, but apparently, he wasn't destitute either. It was almost too much to process. They traveled to Diagon Alley via a night bus that Gomez summoned with enthusiastic waving of his wand, a wild, lurching ride that had Harry clinging to his seat while the Addams family treated it like an amusement park attraction. Wednesday actually smiled during a particularly violent turn that sent an elderly witch's cat flying across the bus. Their arrival at the Leaky Cauldron, the shabby pub that served as the entrance to Diagon Alley, created exactly the stir Gomez had anticipated. The moment Harry stepped through the door, a hush fell over the crowded room, followed by a rising murmur of recognition. It's Harry Potter. Look at his scar. Who are those people with him? It's the Americans from the Prophet. Tom the barkeeper hurried forward, wiping his hands on his apron. Mr. Potter. Welcome, welcome. An honor to have you here, sir. Before Harry could respond, Gomez stepped forward, placing a protective hand on his shoulder. Thank you, my good man. Harry is indeed honored to make your acquaintance. I am Gomez Addams, Harry's temporary guardian, and this is my family. We're on a school shopping expedition. The announcement seemed to break the spell of silence. Patrons surged forward, many reaching out to shake Harry's hand, introducing themselves with obvious awe. Harry did his best to be polite, but quickly felt overwhelmed by the attention. Morticia sensed his discomfort and smoothly intervened. While we appreciate your warm welcome, we have quite a full schedule today. Perhaps another time for extended socializing? Her quiet authority, combined with her striking appearance, created space around Harry immediately. They made their way through the pub to the back courtyard, where Gomez tapped the appropriate bricks with his wand, revealing the magical archway to Diagon Alley. Harry gasped as the cobblestone street came into view, lined with the most extraordinary shops he could imagine. Cauldrons stacked outside one establishment, strange magical instruments whirring and puffing smoke in another window, owls hooting from the darkened interior of the magical menagerie. Magnificent! Gomez declared. Though it could use more gargoyles, don't you think, Tish? Every architectural space benefits from proper gargoyles, Morticia agreed. They add such character to the rooflines. Their first stop was Gringotts, the wizard bank run by goblins. The imposing white marble building dominated the alley, its burnished bronze doors guarded by goblins in scarlet and gold uniforms. Harry read the ominous warning engraved on the second set of doors with growing fascination, "Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed for those who take, but do not earn, must pay most dearly in their turn." Delightful! Gomez exclaimed, reading over Harry's shoulder. Nothing like a good threat of retribution to start a banking relationship. Reminds me of our family motto, we feast on those who would subdue us. Is that really your family motto? Harry asked as they entered the vast marble hall. One of several, Wednesday replied. The others aren't considered appropriate for public buildings. A free goblin directed them to a counter after Harry presented his key, retrieved from the pile of evidence cousin ITT had gathered for the hearing. The goblin examined it closely, then peered at Harry with shrewd, calculating eyes. Mr. Potter. Your first visit to Gringotts, I presume. Interesting that you now possess your vault key directly. Until yesterday, all access to your accounts was managed by your magical guardian. Yes, there's been a change in that arrangement, Gomez confirmed smoothly. We'd like a complete accounting of Harry's holdings, along with any documents regarding past transactions and management decisions. The goblin's eyes narrowed further. Such information is typically restricted to adult account holders or their legal representatives. I have here, Gomez produced a scroll with flourish, the Wisingamott's temporary custody order, granting us authority to review and protect Mr. Potter's assets during the guardianship investigation. The goblin examined the document carefully, then nodded with what might have been approval. Very well. Griphook will take you to the vault first, then to account manager Barchoke for the financial review. The ride down to Harry's vault was another wild experience that delighted the Addams children. The cart hurtled through the twisting underground passages at breakneck speed, while Pugsley whooped with joy and Wednesday meticulously recorded their route in a small notebook. When Griphook opened Vault 687, Harry could only stare in shock. Piles of gold, silver, and bronze coins filled the spacious chamber, glinting in the lamplight. "This is all mine?" he asked faintly. "Your trust vault," Griphook corrected. "Established for your education and maintenance until you reach majority. The main Potter family vaults remain sealed until you turn 17 or are legally emancipated." Harry filled a small bag with coins while Gomez asked detailed questions about exchange rates and investment options. By the time they left Gringotts 2 hours later, Harry's head was swimming with information about his inheritance, including troubling discrepancies in how it had been managed during the past decade. "Nothing overtly illegal," Gomez explained as they descended the marble steps back into the alley. "But certainly questionable. Regular withdrawals for your care and maintenance, that clearly never reached you, investments shifted to support enterprises connected to Dumbledore's allies, charitable donations made in your name to causes you were never consulted about. Can we do anything about it?" Harry asked. "We've initiated a formal audit," Morticia confirmed. "The results will strengthen our case in the final hearing. Money leaves trails, Harry, and those trails tell stories. Stories that may contradict the headmaster's benevolent narrative." Their shopping expedition became a fascinating adventure. At Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions, Harry was fitted alongside a round-faced, nervous boy named Neville Longbottom, whose formidable-looking grandmother nearly fainted when Wednesday casually mentioned her collection of poisonous plants, offering to share cuttings for Neville's herbology studies. "Your new friend has excellent potential," Wednesday observed as they left the shop. "His fear is merely a facade. I saw how his eyes lit up when I mentioned the venomous tentacula." At Flourish and Blots, Gomez went wild, purchasing not only Harry's required texts but dozens of additional volumes on magical law, ancient protections, and wizarding genealogy. "Knowledge is power, my boy. And in your unique position, you need every advantage." The wand-maker's shop, Ollivander's, proved the most intense experience. The ancient, silver-eyed wand-maker greeted Harry by name and proceeded to recount selling the wands that had gone to his parents, and disturbingly, to Voldemort himself. "Curious," Ollivander murmured as a wand of holly and phoenix feather finally responded to Harry with a stream of red and gold sparks. "Most curious indeed." "What's curious?" Harry asked, feeling a strange warmth spreading from the wand into his fingers. "I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter. The phoenix whose tail feather resides in your wand gave just one other feather. Just one. It is curious that you should be destined for this wand when its brother, why, its brother gave you that scar." A chill ran through the shop. Grandmama, who had been quietly observing from the corner, suddenly stepped forward. "Connected wands," she said thoughtfully. "Rare, but not unknown in magical lore. What does it mean for the wielders, Mr. Ollivander?" The wand-maker turned his pale eyes to her. "That, madam, is the true mystery. Brothers that cannot properly duel each other, but whether that makes them enemies who cannot harm one another or opponents destined to face each other, history does not clearly tell us." "Magnificent," Gomez declared, breaking the tension. Harry's magical journey becomes more intriguing by the minute. A wand with a destiny, a mysterious connection to his past, these are the elements of a truly epic tale. Harry wasn't sure he wanted an epic tale. He would have been quite content with a normal, peaceful introduction to the magical world. But normality seemed increasingly unlikely with each new revelation. As they completed their shopping, Harry became aware of the stares and whispers following them. News of his presence in Diagon Alley had spread, and curious witches and wizards found excuses to pass by, hoping for a glimpse of the famous boy who lived and his unconventional guardians. "You're a celebrity, Harry," Morticia explained gently when she noticed his discomfort. "For better or worse, your story is woven into the fabric of this community." "But I didn't do anything," Harry protested. "I was a baby. I don't even remember what happened." "Symbols rarely have a say in what they symbolize," Wednesday observed with unusual insight. "What matters is what you do now that you know." Their final stop was Elop's Owl Emporium, where Gomez insisted on purchasing Harry an owl. Every wizard needs a familiar. A companion for the magical journey ahead. Among the various hooting residents, a beautiful snowy owl caught Harry's eye immediately. Unlike the other owls, she seemed to watch him with intelligent interest rather than mere avian curiosity. "She's perfect," Harry decided, reaching out a tentative finger, which the owl gently nipped. "A magnificent choice," the shop owner approved. Snowy owls are uncommon familiars, intelligent, loyal, and quite discriminating about their wizards. As they exited the shop, Harry's new owl secure in her cage, they nearly collided with an enormous figure blocking most of the alleyway. Harry looked up, and up, into a wild bearded face that broke into a beaming smile of recognition. "Harry! There ya are. Been lookin' all over for ya." "Hagrid?" Harry guessed, remembering the name from conversations with Kingsley and Professor McGonagall. "Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts," the giant man confirmed proudly. "Meant to be the one to bring ya your letter and help with your shopping, but then all this business with the ministry and your new family happened." He glanced somewhat warily at the Addams clan. "A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Hagrid." Gomez extended his hand enthusiastically. "We've heard wonderful things about your role at Hogwarts. Harry will certainly benefit from having such a formidable friend at school." Hagrid seemed momentarily taken aback by Gomez's genuine warmth, having clearly expected a less friendly reception. Right. Professor Dumbledore asked me to check how things were going, make sure Harry had everything he needed for school." "How thoughtful," Morticia commented, her tone neutral but her eyes sharp. "We've just finished our shopping expedition. Perhaps you'd join us for refreshments. I'm sure Harry would appreciate learning more about Hogwarts from someone with your experience." Hagrid's initial wariness gradually dissolved over butterbeers at the Leaky Cauldron. Despite his obvious loyalty to Dumbledore, his affection for Harry seemed genuine. He shared stories about Harry's parents during their school days, bringing tears to Harry's eyes with tales of James Potter's mischievous nature and Lily Evans' brilliant charm work. "Ye've got your mother's eyes, ye know," Hagrid said softly. "Kind eyes. But I see plenty of your dad in ye too." As the afternoon progressed, even Wednesday and Pugsley warmed to Hagrid, particularly after he let slip his fondness for dangerous creatures. By the time they parted ways, Hagrid had extended an invitation for Harry to visit his hut upon arriving at Hogwarts, and Pugsley had extracted a promise to learn more about three-headed dogs, which Hagrid had mentioned and then hastily tried to take back. "A most illuminating day," Morticia observed as they returned to the Addams residence, laden with packages. "You've taken your first steps into the wizarding world proper, Harry." "And what steps they were!" Gomez declared. "Financial revelations. Mysterious wand connections. Magical shopping. Even a spy from Dumbledore who ended up charmed by the Addams allure." "He wasn't a spy," Harry objected, though without much conviction. "He just wanted to make sure I was okay." "Of course he did," Grandmama cackled. "While reporting back to Dumbledore about every detail. Mark my words, boy, that groundskeeper is loyal to his core to Albus Dumbledore. Not a bad man, mind you, but not an independent one either." Harry considered this as he settled his new owl, whom he'd decided to name Hedwig, after a name he'd found in his History of Magic textbook, in his room. The wizarding world was proving more complex than he'd imagined. Everyone seemed to have agendas, alliances, and histories that intersected in ways he was only beginning to understand. But for the first time, he had allies of his own, strange, macabre allies who approached the world sideways but who had shown him more genuine care in a week than he'd experienced in 10 years with the Dursleys. As he drifted off to sleep that night, surrounded by his new school supplies and with Hedwig watching over him from her perch, Harry felt a strange mix of excitement and trepidation. The wizarding world was waiting for him, with all its wonder and its hidden dangers. And thanks to the Addams family, he might actually be ready for it. The remaining weeks of summer passed in a whirlwind of activity. The Addams family seemed determined to provide Harry with a crash course in everything he'd missed growing up isolated from the magical world. Grandmama focused on his physical recovery, brewing potions that tasted increasingly bizarre but left Harry feeling stronger and healthier than he'd ever been. 10 years of neglect doesn't reverse overnight, she explained while stirring something that smelled like burnt rubber and looked like liquid moonlight. But we'll have you right as rain before you face those Hogwarts stairs. 7 flights to some classes, you know. Morticia taught him wizarding etiquette and history, filling in the gaps that his textbooks glossed over. The published histories are written by the victors, she explained, showing him obscure tomes from the Addams library. To understand the present, one must examine the shadows of the past. Gomez took charge of Harry's introduction to magical politics and finance, explaining the complex relationships between ancient families, government institutions, and international magical cooperation. Power, my boy. It flows through channels most never see. Understanding those channels gives you options beyond the obvious. Even Wednesday and Pugsley contributed, in their own peculiar way. Pugsley demonstrated experimental magic that often ended in minor explosions but taught Harry to think about magical theory creatively. Wednesday, meanwhile, took a more academic approach, quizzing Harry on potential potions' ingredients and their properties, with particular emphasis on the poisonous varieties. It's important to know which ones kill quickly and which ones take time, she explained seriously. For academic purposes, of course. Of course, Harry agreed, not entirely convinced but fascinated nonetheless. Visitors came and went regularly. Professor McGonagall appeared weekly, ostensibly to check on Harry's preparation for Hogwarts but clearly also reporting back to Dumbledore. Kingsley Shacklebolt remained a frequent presence, maintaining his role as ministry observer while developing what seemed to be a genuine respect for the Addams family's unconventional approach. "They're not what I expected," Harry overheard him telling Professor McGonagall one afternoon as they thought he was occupied with his Transfiguration reading. "Eccentric, certainly. Borderline dark in some of their practices. But their care for Harry is genuine, and their protective magic is remarkably effective. Albus remains concerned about long-term implications," McGonagall replied. "The blood protection has been successfully transferred," Kingsley interrupted. "Grandmama Addams accomplished what our experts claimed was impossible. The protection now anchors to Harry himself rather than a reluctant blood relative. I've verified it personally." This conversation confirmed something Harry had suspected but not fully understood. One night shortly after the hearing, Grandmama had performed a ritual in the garden under the full moon. Harry remembered blood, his own, freely given, mixed with something Morticia had provided, and ancient words that seemed to resonate in his bones rather than his ears. He'd felt something shift within him, like a weight being redistributed, and slept more peacefully afterward than he ever had before. The legal proceedings continued in the background. Gomez regularly disappeared to the ministry for meetings with officials, returning with updates on their progress. The investigation into Sirius Black's imprisonment had uncovered troubling inconsistencies, and pressure was mounting for a formal trial. "The system resists exposure of its failings," Gomez explained over dinner one evening. "But the cracks are widening. The questions we've raised about one case lead naturally to others: magical guardianship protocols, Wisengamot emergency powers, ministry oversight of Azkaban." The ripples spread. Harry found himself both grateful for and occasionally overwhelmed by the Addams family's wholehearted championing of his cause. Their enthusiasm sometimes transformed what he'd imagined would be a simple custody case into what felt like a crusade to reform Wizarding Britain entirely. "Is all this really necessary?" he asked Morticia one evening as they sat in the conservatory, watching Wednesday feed mice to the carnivorous orchids. "I mean, I appreciate everything you're doing, but it seems like it's getting bigger than just me." Morticia regarded him thoughtfully. "In the magical world, Harry, very little is ever just anything. Your placement with the Dursleys wasn't simply a poor guardian choice, it was part of a larger pattern of decisions made by powerful people, decisions that shaped your life without your knowledge or consent. So this is about making those people accountable?" Harry guessed. "Partly," Morticia nodded. "But more importantly, it's about ensuring you have the freedom to make your own choices going forward. Knowledge is power, Harry. Understanding the forces that have shaped your past helps you reclaim agency over your future." It was moments like these that made Harry profoundly grateful fate had brought the Addams family into his life. Beneath their macabre aesthetics and unconventional methods lay a wisdom and clarity of purpose that he found increasingly valuable. As September 1st approached, preparations intensified. Harry's trunk was packed with school supplies, additional books Gomez insisted would be invaluable resources, protective amulets from Grandmama, and a small, ornate box from Morticia that she instructed him to open only in case of emergency. "What kind of emergency?" Harry had asked. "You'll know," she replied cryptically, her dark eyes holding knowledge she wasn't yet ready to share. The night before his departure for Hogwarts, the Addams family held a special dinner in Harry's honor. The long dining table was set with their finest silver, which occasionally moved of its own accord, crystal goblets filled with a deep red liquid that Harry suspected wasn't wine, and black candles that burned with strangely colored flames. "A toast," Gomez declared, rising dramatically with his goblet held high. "To Harry Potter, who came to us a stranger and leaves as family. May your education be as extraordinary as you are." "To Harry," the others echoed, raising their glasses. "I'm not really leaving," Harry pointed out, touched nonetheless. "I'll be back for holidays." "Of course you will," Morticia assured him. "This is your home now, for as long as you wish it to be." Home. The word still felt strange to Harry, loaded with meaning he was only beginning to understand. The Dursleys' house had never been home, merely a place of confinement. But this eccentric mansion, with its shifting architecture and dangerous decor, had somehow become more home to him in a few weeks than Privet Drive had in 10 years. "We have gifts," Pugsley announced excitedly. "Mine first." Harry unwrapped Pugsley's package to find what appeared to be a small mechanical spider, intricately crafted from brass and copper. "Wind it up and it'll find the nearest food source," Pugsley explained proudly. "Great for midnight snacks. Though sometimes it brings back weird stuff. Cousin Itt had to get stitches last time I used it." Wednesday presented him with a slender black book bound in what Harry hoped wasn't actual human skin. "My journal from when I was your age," she explained. "I've annotated it with observations about poisons, curses, and social dynamics that might prove useful at boarding school." Grandmama gave him a collection of potion vials in a wooden case, each meticulously labeled in her spidery handwriting. "For emergencies," she instructed. "The blue one's for nightmares, the green for stomach troubles, the red for pain, and the black one, well, save that for when someone truly deserves it." Morticia and Gomez presented their gift last, a small silver mirror in an ornate frame decorated with what looked like tiny skulls. "A two-way mirror," Gomez explained. "We have its twin. Speak our name to it, and we can communicate instantly, regardless of distance or magical barriers. Hogwarts has certain restrictions on normal communication, but this is old magic, family magic. The kind Hogwarts doesn't monitor," Morticia added with a small smile. "Should you need us, for any reason, we'll be there." Harry's throat tightened with emotion he couldn't quite express. The gifts weren't just objects, they were promises of continued connection, assurances that his newfound family wouldn't abandon him once he was out of sight. "Thank you," he managed finally. For everything. I don't know where I'd be if you hadn't stopped at Privet Drive that day. Fate, my boy. Gomez declared, clapping him on the shoulder. The Addams family has always had a special relationship with destiny. When the universe wishes two paths to cross, not even dimensional barriers can prevent it. Harry wasn't entirely sure what Gomez meant by that, but the sentiment warmed him nonetheless. Later that night, unable to sleep with excitement and nerves, Harry wandered to the library. He found Wednesday there, reading by candlelight, a large tome open before her. "Trouble sleeping?" she asked without looking up. "Too much thinking," Harry admitted, sitting across from her. "Everything's changing again." Wednesday marked her place in the book and regarded him with her solemn eyes. "Change is inevitable. Growth is optional." "You sound like a greeting card," Harry teased, having grown comfortable enough with Wednesday to risk such remarks. A flicker of amusement crossed her face. "Plagiarism. I stole it from Mother. But the sentiment is accurate." She closed her book fully. "You're worried about Hogwarts." It wasn't a question, but Harry nodded anyway. "What if I'm terrible at magic? What if everyone expects the boy who lived to be amazing, and I'm just ordinary?" "You won't be," Wednesday stated with typical bluntness. "Ordinary people don't survive killing curses. Ordinary people don't upend the wizarding legal system before they're 11. Ordinary people don't adapt to the Addams family without flinching." Put that way, Harry had to admit she had a point. His life hadn't been ordinary by any standard. Besides, Wednesday continued, being extraordinary isn't about meeting others' expectations. It's about defying them. A rare smile curved her lips. "Something tells me you'll excel at that part." Harry found himself returning her smile. In her strange, deadpan way, Wednesday had become something like the sister he'd never had, brutal in her honesty but fiercely loyal beneath the surface. "Thanks, Wednesday." She nodded once, returning to her book. "Don't mention it. Seriously, don't. I have a reputation to maintain." The morning of September 1st dawned gray and drizzly, which Grandmama declared excellent weather for new beginnings. "Clear skies are for mundane journeys," she announced, checking the contents of Harry's trunk one last time. "Mist and shadow welcome the extraordinary." The journey to King's Cross Station was mercifully uneventful, though Harry noticed Gomez looked slightly disappointed that no ministry officials tried to intercept them along the way. "I had a whole speech prepared about educational rights and habeas corpus," he sighed regretfully. Platform 9 3/4 proved exactly as magical as Harry had imagined. The scarlet Hogwarts Express gleamed despite the gray day, steam billowing from its stack as students and parents milled about saying goodbyes and handling luggage. Their arrival created the now familiar ripple of recognition and whispers. The Addams family stood out dramatically among the wizarding families, Gomez in his pinstriped suit, Morticia in her flowing black gown, Wednesday and Pugsley looking like Victorian children on a funeral outing, and Grandmama resembling everyone's idea of a fairy tale witch. Harry Potter. With those Americans from the papers. "Did you see the hearing coverage? Dumbledore's furious, I heard." Harry had grown somewhat accustomed to the attention, though it still made him uncomfortable. He focused instead on taking in the platform, watching other students with their families and wondering what houses they belonged to. "Remember," Morticia instructed as Lurch loaded his trunk onto the train, "house affiliations at Hogwarts can shape your experience, but they needn't define you. Each has its virtues and its limitations." "Slytherin values cunning and ambition," Wednesday recited, having extensively researched the houses. "Ravenclaw prizes intelligence and creativity. Hufflepuff values loyalty and hard work. Gryffindor celebrates courage and daring. All excellent qualities," Gomez declared. "And Addams would thrive in any of them. Though personally, I found the Hufflepuff common room excellently suited for midnight excavation projects. Something about the proximity to the kitchens and the soil composition." A warning whistle sounded from the train. The moment for departure had arrived. "Write to us," Morticia said, embracing Harry gently. "And remember the mirror for more immediate concerns. Watch out for the third-floor corridor," Pugsley advised cryptically. "Hagrid told us it's off-limits this year. That means something cool is definitely there. Consider alliances carefully," Wednesday added. "First impressions in social hierarchies can be difficult to revise later." Grandmama pressed one final vial into his hand. "For the sorting," she whispered. "Calms the nerves without dulling the wits. 2 drops, no more." Gomez was the last to say goodbye, gripping Harry's shoulders firmly and looking into his eyes with rare seriousness. "Remember who you are, Harry. Not what they expect you to be, but who you choose to become. The Addams family stands with you, whatever path you choose." The simplicity and sincerity of the statement nearly undid Harry completely. He managed a nod, not trusting himself to speak. With final hugs and promises to write, Harry boarded the train. He found an empty compartment and leaned out the window to wave as the Hogwarts Express began to move. The Addams family stood out starkly against the platform, a tableau of Gothic elegance amid the mundane crowd. As the train rounded a bend and the platform disappeared from view, Harry sat back in his seat, both excited and apprehensive about what lay ahead. The past summer had transformed his life completely, from an unwanted burden in a cupboard to a wizard with a family who championed him, with access to his birthright and knowledge of his heritage. Whatever Hogwarts held in store, Harry Potter was no longer facing it alone. And that made all the difference. Chapter 3, When Worlds Collapse. Harry's first week at Hogwarts was nothing short of surreal. The ancient castle with its moving staircases, talking portraits, and secret passages would have been overwhelming enough on its own. Add in being the most famous first year in recent history, with a highly publicized custody battle raging in the background, and Harry found himself in a constant state of bewilderment. There he is. Did you see his scar? I heard he lives with monsters now. My dad says Dumbledore's livid about the whole thing. The whispers followed him everywhere. Some students openly stared, while others pretended not to notice him but watched from the corners of their eyes. A few, particularly among the Slytherins, regarded him with calculating interest that made Harry think of Wednesday's warnings about social hierarchies. His sorting had been a moment of high drama. The moment the hat touched his head, it had chuckled. Interesting, very interesting. You've changed since your name was first entered in the Hogwarts book, Mr. Potter. New influences. New perspectives. And what's this? A connection to the Addams lineage? Not by blood, but by choice and magic. Most unusual. Harry had gripped the edges of the stool nervously. Is that bad? Bad? No, no. Just unexpected. You have qualities of all 4 houses now, you know. Courage enough for Gryffindor, certainly. A mind that could serve Ravenclaw well. Loyalty that Hufflepuff would prize. An ambition and cunning that Slytherin would nurture. So where do I belong? The hat had been silent for what felt like an eternity. The great hall had grown increasingly restive, whispers building as Harry's sorting stretched far longer than any previous student's. You belong where you'll grow strongest, the hat finally decided. Where you'll forge the connections that will shape not just your future but the future of our world. Better be. Gryffindor. The red and gold table had erupted in cheers, though Harry thought he detected a hint of surprise on Professor McGonagall's face as she removed the hat. Had she expected him elsewhere? Now, a week into term, Harry sat at breakfast with Ron Weasley, a red-headed boy who'd introduced himself on the train and seemed refreshingly unconcerned about Harry's fame, and Hermione Granger, a bushy-haired girl whose encyclopedic knowledge reminded Harry a bit of Cousin Itt's information network. You've got another letter, Ron pointed out as the owl post arrived. That's the 3rd this week. My parents barely write once a month. Harry accepted the black envelope from a sleek raven, not an owl, that arrived alongside the regular post. The Addams family never did anything conventionally. It's from my guardians, Harry explained, breaking the silver wax seal stamped with the Addams crest. They like to stay informed. They're the American family from the papers, right? Hermione asked eagerly. The ones challenging Professor Dumbledore about your custody? I've read everything I could find about the case. It's fascinating from a magical law perspective. They've invoked statutes that haven't been used in centuries. Harry smiled slightly. That sounds like Gomez. He says magical law is like an elaborate game where half the pieces have been forgotten but are still technically in play. He unfolded the letter, written in Morticia's elegant script on parchment that somehow seemed to absorb rather than reflect the morning sunlight. My dear Harry, we trust this finds you well and adapting to life at Hogwarts. Your last letter mentioned difficulties with a Professor Snape. Remember what Wednesday told you about authority figures who use their power to intimidate rather than educate. They fear what they cannot control, and nothing is less controllable than a mind that questions. Regarding your scar hurting during the welcoming feast, Grandmama finds this most concerning, particularly its coincidence with eye contact from certain parties. She has enclosed a small sachet to place beneath your pillow. It won't prevent the pain but should help us trace its magical origins. Now to business matters. The final hearing has been scheduled for October 31st, Samhain, appropriately enough, when the veil between worlds thins. The Wisengamot likely chose the date for administrative convenience, unaware of its magical significance, but we shall use it to our advantage. Sirius Black's case has gained significant traction. The lack of trial records has forced the DMLE to acknowledge procedural failures. Director Bones has ordered a formal review, including questioning under Veritaserum. Cousin ITT believes a full trial will be scheduled before Yule. Gomez sends his love and asks that you pay particular attention in History of Magic, despite Professor Bin's soporific delivery. The Goblin Rebellions contain valuable lessons about financial leverage in magical conflicts that may prove relevant to our situation. Thing misses you terribly and has taken to carrying your photograph around the house. Pugsley's latest experiment with self-propelling dumb bombs was dedicated to you. Wednesday has been corresponding with several poisonous plant suppliers regarding specimens that might thrive in the Scottish Highlands, purely for academic purposes, she assures us. Be vigilant but not fearful, curious but not reckless. And remember, you are never truly alone. The connection we established goes beyond distance. With deepest affection, Morticia P.S. Lurch has packed a small care package with some of Grandmama's special treats. If the school owl that delivers it seems traumatized, pay it no mind. The package passed all magical security screenings, despite certain, unconventional ingredients. Harry folded the letter with a smile. The Addams family's correspondence was always a strange mix of practical information, political updates, and bizarre domestic details that somehow made him feel connected to them despite the distance. They sound mental, Ron observed, having read parts of the letter over Harry's shoulder. In a good way, though. My dad mentioned your guardian, said he's never seen anyone so enthusiastic about exploiting legal loopholes. Mr. Addams does enjoy a good legal battle, Harry agreed. He says it combines the thrill of combat with the satisfaction of intellectual victory. But what about Professor Dumbledore? Hermione asked, lowering her voice. He's the greatest wizard of our time. Doesn't it bother you, being part of a case against him? Harry considered his response carefully. Despite only knowing her a week, he recognized Hermione's deep respect for authority and books. It's not really against him personally, he explained. It's about whether the decisions he made were right for me. Great wizards can still make mistakes. Hermione looked troubled by this concept but nodded thoughtfully. I suppose that's true. It's just hard to imagine Professor Dumbledore doing anything wrong. Speaking of Dumbledore, Ron interjected, he keeps watching you, mate. Not all the time, but enough that Fred and George have noticed too. Harry had observed this himself. The headmaster rarely approached him directly, in fact, he seemed to be maintaining a careful distance, but Harry often felt those penetrating blue eyes following him across the great hall or down corridors. "Gomez says it's because I've become an unknown variable," Harry said, reaching for the marmalade. "Dumbledore had a plan for how my life was supposed to go, and now that plan's been disrupted. He's recalculating." "That sounds a bit controlling, doesn't it?" Hermione frowned. "Surely the headmaster wouldn't have your whole life planned out." Harry shrugged. "Maybe not. But something's definitely got him worried." He glanced up at the staff table, where Dumbledore was engaged in conversation with Professor McGonagall while seeming to carefully avoid looking in Harry's direction. "And I think we're going to find out what it is soon enough." Gomez Addams paced the length of their London residence's library, practically vibrating with energy. Maps, legal documents, and arcane texts covered every surface, transforming the elegant room into what looked like a war room for a particularly eccentric general. "It's coming together, Tish," he declared, stabbing a finger at a particularly complex diagram. "All the pieces aligning for the final confrontation." Morticia looked up from the ancient tome she was studying. "The timing is certainly auspicious. Samhain has always been powerful for the Addams bloodline. The veil thins, and truths are harder to conceal." "Precisely." Gomez executed a perfect fencing lunge, narrowly missing a stack of ministry records. "Dumbledore has maintained his position through careful control of information, who knows what, when they know it, how it's interpreted. But we've been systematically dismantling that control." A series of rapid knocks announced Thing's arrival. The disembodied hand skittered across the floor carrying a sealed parchment. "Ah! News from Gringotts." Gomez snatched the document eagerly. His eyes widened as he read. "Magnificent. The goblins have completed their audit of the Potter accounts. Evidence of, well, not quite embezzlement, but certainly creative reallocation of funds. Primarily to organizations controlled by Dumbledore's political allies. Nothing overtly criminal, I imagine," Morticia observed. "Albus Dumbledore is too clever for that." "No, nothing we could directly prosecute," Gomez agreed. "But a pattern of decisions that consistently diverted Harry's resources toward Dumbledore's priorities. Combined with everything else, it creates a compelling narrative of control and manipulation." Cousin Itt burst into the room, chittering rapidly. "The Department of Mysteries?" Gomez's eyebrows shot up. "Are you certain?" More rapid chittering. "A prophecy? Involving Harry and Voldemort?" Gomez whistled. "Now that is interesting. The plot thickens, Tish. A prophetic connection would explain Dumbledore's extraordinary interest in controlling Harry's development. And potentially his placement with abusive relatives," Morticia added thoughtfully. "If he believed Harry needed certain, formative experiences to fulfill this prophecy." Gomez's usual joviality faltered. "Sacrificing a child's well-being for a predetermined fate. That's dark, Tish. Darker than even I anticipated." "The greatest evils are often committed in service of the greatest goods," Morticia observed. "At least in the minds of those who believe they alone understand what good truly means." Their philosophical discussion was interrupted by the arrival of Grandmama, who swept into the library with unusual urgency, a smoking veal clutched in her gnarled hand. "The sachet I sent Harry has returned results," she announced grimly. "I've analyzed the magical signature it captured from his scar. It's unlike anything I've encountered in my 137 years. "What kind of magic are we dealing with?" Gomez asked, instantly serious. "Soul magic," Grandmama replied, placing the vial on a cleared space on the desk. Inside, something dark and viscous writhed against the glass. "Very dark, very old. The kind that requires death to activate." Morticia moved closer, studying the roiling substance. "A fragment?" she asked softly. Grandmama nodded. "If I'm right, and I usually am about matters of dark magic, the boy's scar contains a fragment of Voldemort himself. A piece broken off during the killing curse's rebound. A Horcrux, Morticia breathed, her normally imperturbable composure shaken. Or something very like it. Horcrux. Gomez repeated. The soul vessel from Herpo the Fowl's experiments. I thought that knowledge was suppressed centuries ago. Suppressed but not destroyed, Grandmama confirmed. And I'd wager my best cauldron that Albus Dumbledore knows exactly what's in Harry's scar. It explains everything, why he's so invested in controlling the boy's life, why he placed him with those awful muggles, why he's fighting so hard to maintain his guardianship. Because Harry might have to die to defeat Voldemort completely, Morticia concluded, her voice hollow. He's been raising a sacrifice, not a child. For perhaps the first time since Harry had met him, Gomez Addams was momentarily speechless with shock. Then, his expression hardened into something that would have made even Wednesday take a step back. Not while an Addams draws breath, he said quietly. We need to accelerate our plans. The final hearing cannot just be about custody anymore, it needs to expose everything. Cousin Itt chittered a warning. Too dangerous. Gomez scoffed. Of course it's dangerous. We're challenging the most powerful wizard in Britain and exposing secrets he's kept for a decade. But danger has never stopped an Addams before, and it certainly won't now. Not when a child's life hangs in the balance. Thing tapped out a message on the desk. Yes, you're right, Morticia nodded. We need allies. This revelation changes the scope of our challenge considerably. I'll contact Madame Bones directly, Gomez decided. She's proven herself to be one of the few ministry officials with both integrity and backbone. And perhaps it's time to have that conversation with Lucius Malfoy that he's been angling for. His motives may be suspect, but his resources are considerable. And I, Grandmama declared, already gathering ingredients from various pockets, will begin working on a solution for Harry's passenger. The Addams grimoires contain rituals that predate Hogwarts itself. If there's a way to remove a soul fragment without harming its host, we'll find it. As they dispersed to their various tasks, Morticia gazed out the window at the gathering autumn twilight. Somewhere in Scotland, Harry was navigating a magical education while unknowingly carrying a piece of the darkest wizard in recent history within him. Somewhere in the same castle, Albus Dumbledore was orchestrating moves in a game where Harry was both pawn and prize. The board has changed, she murmured to herself. And so must the game. Halloween at Hogwarts arrived with a sense of anticipation that had nothing to do with the usual feast. Word had spread throughout the castle that today was the final hearing in the Potter custody case, the day when the Wisengamot would decide whether Harry would return to his Muggle relatives, remain with the Addams family, or perhaps be placed somewhere else entirely. Harry tried to focus on his classes, but it was nearly impossible. Every student seemed to be watching him, whispering behind their hands. Even the professors were distracted, with Professor McGonagall twice calling Neville by the wrong name and tiny Professor Flitwick toppling from his stack of books when a student asked him directly about the hearing. You should be there, Ron insisted as they walked to herbology. It's your life they're deciding. Doesn't seem right that you're stuck learning about bouncing bulbs while your future gets sorted. Gomez tried to get me permission to attend, Harry explained. But Dumbledore blocked it, saying it would be disruptive to my education. Morticia thinks he doesn't want me to hear some of what might come out in the proceedings. What could be so bad that you shouldn't hear it? Hermione wondered. Harry had been asking himself the same question. The Addams family's letters had grown increasingly cryptic in recent weeks, hinting at discoveries too sensitive to commit to parchment. His mirror conversations with them had been similarly guarded, with Gomez frequently glancing over his shoulder as if worried about being overheard. I guess we'll find out soon enough, Harry sighed. The Prophet will probably have a special evening edition. When they entered the greenhouse, Professor Sprout was listening to a small wireless radio tucked beside a pot of writhing tentacula. She hastily switched it off when she noticed the students arriving. Just checking the weather forecast, she explained unconvincingly. Quite important for certain magical plants, you know. Throughout the day, Harry caught glimpses of similar scenes, Professor Sinistra huddled with Professor Vector in a corridor, their conversation stopping abruptly when they noticed him, Madame Pants uncharacteristically allowing a group of 7th years to gather around a newspaper in the library. Even Hagrid, who'd become a regular friendly presence in Harry's life at Hogwarts, seemed distracted when Harry stopped by his hut during a free period. "Can't talk now, Harry," the giant man had said nervously. "Got some, gamekeeper business to attend to. Important stuff. Why don't ya head back to the castle? Feast'll be starting before ya know it." By dinner time, the tension in the Great Hall was palpable. The Halloween decorations, floating pumpkins, live bats, and ghostly projections, seemed at odds with the serious expressions at the staff table. Dumbledore's seat remained conspicuously empty, as did Professor McGonagall's and, surprisingly, Professor Snape's. "They're all at the hearing," Hermione whispered. "It must be really important if Professor Dumbledore is missing the Halloween feast." "Fred and George reckon they're going to announce the result during the feast," Ron added, piling mashed potatoes onto his plate. "For maximum dramatic effect, you know." Harry picked at his food without much appetite. Despite his outward calm, his stomach was in knots. He'd grown to love living with the Addams family, as bizarre as they were. The thought of being sent back to the Dursleys, or even to some new guardian chosen by the Ministry, filled him with dread. He was reaching for a pitcher of pumpkin juice when a searing pain shot through his scar. Harry gasped, his hand flying to his forehead as the pain intensified, unlike anything he'd experienced before. "Harry?" Hermione's concerned voice seemed to come from very far away. "What's wrong? Should we get Madame Pomfrey?" Before Harry could respond, the Great Hall's doors burst open with a bang that silenced all conversation. Professor Quirrell, the nervous defense against the dark arts teacher, stumbled in, his turban askew and terror on his face. "Troll," he gasped, reaching the staff table and clinging to it for support. "In the dungeons. Thought you ought to know." He collapsed in a dead faint. The hall erupted into chaos. Students screamed, several Hufflepuffs nearly overturned their table in panic, and the remaining professors struggled to restore order. Finally, Professor Flitwick managed to produce a sound like a cannon blast from his wand, shocking everyone into silence. "Prefects," he squeaked, standing on the staff table to be seen. "Lead your houses back to dormitories immediately. Slytherins, remain here until we've secured the dungeons. Staff, follow me to locate the creature." As the students began to move, Harry's scar gave another painful throb. Something about this situation felt wrong, beyond the obvious danger of a troll in the school. The timing was too convenient, the distraction too perfect. "Ron," he grabbed his friend's arm as they joined the line of Gryffindors. "Hermione. This doesn't feel right." "Of course it doesn't feel right," Hermione hissed. "There's a troll in the school. That shouldn't be possible with Hogwarts protections." "Exactly," Harry nodded. "And on tonight of all nights, when Dumbledore and half the staff are away at the Ministry. When the hearing about my custody is happening." Ron's eyes widened. "You think someone let it in on purpose? As a distraction? Or worse," Harry muttered, his hand still pressed to his throbbing scar. "We need to," he broke off as a terrible realization struck him. "Neville," he gasped. He went back to the dormitory early with a headache. "He doesn't know about the troll." "The prefects will check the dormitories," Hermione reassured him. "No, not our dormitory," Harry corrected. "He said something about visiting that third-floor corridor Dumbledore warned us about, wanted to see what was so dangerous about it. Said his gran always told him to face his fears directly." Ron paled beneath his freckles. "Bloody hell. That's exactly the sort of rotten luck Neville would have, stuck between a troll and whatever deadly thing Dumbledore's hiding up there." Harry made a split-second decision. "You two follow the prefects. I'm going to find Neville." "Are you mental?" Ron gaped. "That's exactly what you shouldn't do. Let the teachers handle it. The teachers are all heading to the dungeons, Harry pointed out. And they don't even know Neville's missing. I have to try. Hermione grabbed his arm. Then we're coming with you. That's what friends do. Harry wanted to argue but recognized the stubborn set of her jaw. Fine. But we're just going to find Neville and warn him, then get straight back to the dormitory. They slipped away from the Gryffindor line during a moment of confusion near a moving staircase. Harry led them through a shortcut he discovered during his first week, a narrow passage behind a tapestry that connected the main floor to the third-floor corridor. How do you know about all these secret routes? Ron asked as they emerged near their destination. Gomez gave me tips, Harry explained. Said he explored every inch of Hogwarts during his exchange year. Left his mark on the place, apparently. They fell silent as they approached the forbidden corridor. An ominous stillness hung in the air, broken only by the distant sounds of professors organizing the troll hunt several floors below. I don't see Neville, Hermione whispered. He must have gone inside, Harry replied, eyeing the closed door at the end of the corridor. Why else would Dumbledore forbid it unless there was something to see? Or something dangerous, Ron pointed out nervously. Harry was about to respond when a muffled shout came from beyond the door, definitely Neville's voice, and definitely terrified. He's in trouble. Harry broke into a run, wand drawn. Ron and Hermione followed close behind. The door was locked, but Hermione quickly demonstrated a spell Harry hadn't learned yet. Alohomora. The lock clicked open, and Harry pushed through the door, expecting to find Neville facing whatever mysterious danger lurked in the forbidden corridor. What he found instead stopped him dead in his tracks. A monstrous three-headed dog filled almost the entire room, its 3 sets of yellowed fangs dripping saliva as it growled at the intruders. Neville was pressed against the far wall, whimpering in terror as one of the heads snuffled closer to him. Cerberus, Hermione breathed. A genuine Cerberus. The creature's 6 eyes swiveled toward the newcomers. For a moment, no one moved. Then all 3 heads roared in unison, a deafening sound that shook dust from the ceiling. Run! Harry shouted, darting forward to grab Neville's arm. The 4 of them tumbled back through the door just as massive paws slammed against it. Ron and Harry threw their weight against the wood until Hermione relocked it with trembling hands. What the bloody hell is that doing in a school? Ron demanded when they'd retreated to a safe distance. Guarding something, Harry realized, remembering the trapdoor he'd glimpsed beneath the dog's enormous paws. It was standing on a trapdoor. Who cares what it's guarding? Neville moaned, still shaking from his near-death experience. We need to get back to the dormitory before it breaks down that door. They were hurrying toward Gryffindor Tower when a different kind of commotion reached their ears, raised voices, running footsteps, and the unmistakable heavy tread of something very large that wasn't where it was supposed to be. The troll, Hermione whispered in horror. It's not in the dungeons anymore. Rounding a corner, they came face to face with the creature, 12 feet tall, its lumpy body giving off a foul stench, dragging a wooden club along the floor. It hadn't noticed them yet, but they were directly in its path with nowhere to hide. Back up slowly, Harry murmured. Maybe it won't, the troll's tiny eyes fixed on them, and a grunt of recognition rumbled from its throat. Never mind. Run. For the second time in minutes, they found themselves fleeing for their lives. The troll lumbered after them with surprising speed, its club smashing portraits and suits of armor as it pursued them down the corridor. We need a professor. Hermione cried as they ran. There aren't any. Ron shouted back. They're all in the dungeons. Harry's mind raced, trying to remember anything from their defense against the dark arts classes that might help against a mountain troll. Unfortunately, Professor Quirrell's lessons had been mostly theoretical and frequently interrupted by his nervous stutter. Then he remembered something Wednesday had told him during one of their discussions about magical creatures. Trolls have thick magic-resistant skin, but their eyes and ears are vulnerable. When in doubt, go for the sensory organs. I have an idea. Harry called to the others. Ron, Hermione, when I give the signal, cast the brightest light spell you know directly at its face. Neville, make the loudest noise you can. What signal? Neville panted. Harry didn't have time to explain. The corridor ahead ended in a T-junction. When they reached it, Harry spun around, wand raised. The others followed his lead, backing against the wall as the troll bore down on them. Now! Harry shouted. Lumos Maxima! Ron and Hermione cried in unison. Blinding light erupted from their wands, striking the troll directly in its sensitive eyes. Neville, showing unexpected presence of mind, pointed his wand at a nearby suit of armor and yelled, Flipendo. The knockback jinx sent the armor crashing to the floor with an ear-splitting clatter. The troll roared in pain and confusion, dropping its club to cover its eyes and ears. Harry seized the opportunity, aiming his wand at the discarded weapon. Wingardium Leviosa. The massive club rose shakily into the air. Harry guided it directly above the troll's head, then released the spell. The club crashed down with sickening force, and the troll swayed for a moment before collapsing with a thud that shook the entire corridor. Silence fell, broken only by their heavy breathing. Is it dead? Hermione whispered. Just knocked out, I think, Harry replied, approaching cautiously to check. That was brilliant. Ron exclaimed, clapping Harry on the back. Where'd you learn that strategy? My family, Harry answered, still finding it strange but wonderful to refer to the Addamses that way. Wednesday has a thing for dangerous creatures. Before they could celebrate further, the sound of running footsteps approached. Professors McGonagall, Snape, and Flitwick rounded the corner, wands drawn, and stopped dead at the sight before them. Explain yourselves. Professor McGonagall demanded, her face white with shock. The four students exchanged glances, then launched into a jumbled explanation involving Neville's absence from the feast, the three-headed dog, and their unexpected encounter with the troll. To their surprise, Professor McGonagall seemed less concerned about their rule-breaking than Harry would have expected. She appeared distracted, exchanging significant looks with Professor Snape, whose robes Harry noticed were torn at the knee, with what looked like a fresh wound beneath. 10 points from Gryffindor for disobeying instructions during an emergency, she finally declared. And 20 points to each of you for sheer dumb luck in surviving a mountain troll. Now return to your dormitory immediately. The situation is more complicated than you realize. As they turned to leave, Harry caught a fragment of whispered conversation between the professors. Cannot believe the timing, Severus. First the hearing revelations, now this breach of security. Deliberate, obviously. The Dark Lord's remaining servants would have felt. Albus will need to be informed immediately. The professor's urgent tones and grim expressions confirmed Harry's suspicion, something much bigger than a wayward troll was happening tonight. Back in Gryffindor Tower, the common room was abuzz with rumors about the troll, the absent professors, and most of all, the hearing at the ministry. When Harry and his friends entered, having survived their encounter with the troll, they were immediately surrounded by curious housemates. Is it true you took down a troll? Did McGonagall expel you? Have you heard anything about the hearing? Harry was attempting to answer their questions when a barn owl swooped through an open window, dropping a black envelope directly into his hands before departing. The Addams family crest gleamed in silver wax on the seal. The common room fell silent as Harry opened the letter with trembling fingers. He read quickly, his expression cycling through shock, disbelief, and finally grim understanding. What is it, mate? Ron asked anxiously. Not bad news, is it? Harry looked up at the circle of curious faces surrounding him. It's from Morticia. The hearing, it didn't go the way anyone expected. Tell us, several voices urged. Harry took a deep breath. It's better if I just read it. My dearest Harry, what began as a custody hearing has evolved into something far more significant. I write to you now from the ministry, where chaos reigns in the aftermath of today's revelations. The proceedings began conventionally enough, with presentations from our advocates and Headmaster Dumbledore's representatives regarding your placement. Director Bones presided with her usual efficiency, and for the first hour, matters progressed as anticipated. Everything changed when Grandmama presented her findings regarding your scar. I shall be direct, Harry, as we have always been with you. Your scar contains a fragment of Voldemort himself, inadvertently created the night he attempted to kill you. This revelation stunned the Wizengamot into silence, but what followed was more shocking still. Dumbledore admitted he had suspected this connection for years. Moreover, he revealed the existence of a prophecy made before your birth, naming you as the only one capable of vanquishing the Dark Lord permanently. His entire strategy for your upbringing, the placement with abusive relatives, the withholding of knowledge about your heritage, even the management of your family assets, was designed around preparing you for an eventual confrontation with Voldemort, whom he believes is not truly dead but merely disembodied. The Wizengamot's reaction was immediate and dramatic. Questions about Dumbledore's judgment escalated into challenges to his various positions of authority. Amid this turmoil, Sirius Black's case was brought forward as further evidence of systemic failures. Veritaserum testimony has confirmed his innocence in your parents' betrayal. The true culprit was Peter Pettigrew, who remains at large. As I write this, the Minister for Magic has called for Dumbledore's temporary removal from his positions pending a complete investigation. The Hogwarts Board of Governors has been summoned for an emergency session. Aurors have been dispatched to the school following reports of a security breach involving a mountain troll. We dearly hope you are safe and uninvolved in that particular situation. Most critically, Grandmama has proposed a ritual that may safely remove Voldemort's soul fragment from your scar. The Department of Mysteries has expressed interest in collaborating on this endeavor, recognizing that traditional methods would be fatal to the host. We have been granted full custody of you, effective immediately, with Sirius Black to be named your godfather upon his official exoneration. Dumbledore's guardianship has been permanently revoked. We shall arrive at Hogwarts tomorrow to see you in person and discuss these matters properly. Until then, remain vigilant. The revelations today will have far-reaching consequences, and not all who hear them will react benevolently. With deepest affection and concern, Morticia Addams. P.S. Gomez suggests you keep your invisibility cloak close at hand tonight. Yes, we know about it. It was among your father's possessions that our legal team recovered from Dumbledore's safekeeping. Family heirlooms should remain with family. The common room erupted into shocked exclamations and frantic questions as Harry finished reading. He sat heavily in an armchair, trying to process everything he'd just learned. A prophecy. A soul fragment. Sirius Black's innocence. Dumbledore's calculated manipulation of his entire life. And somewhere in the castle, someone had deliberately created a diversion with a troll on the very night these revelations came to light. Harry, Hermione's voice cut through the chaos, her expression grave. If what your guardian wrote is true, you're in danger right now. Tonight. Here at Hogwarts. Harry nodded, the pieces clicking together in his mind. If Voldemort isn't really dead, and his followers know that now, they might try to get to me while everything's in chaos. Or worse, Ron added grimly, get to whatever that three-headed dog is guarding. Bet you anything it's connected to all this. The portrait hole swung open, and Professor McGonagall entered. The common room fell instantly silent as she surveyed them, her eyes finally landing on Harry. Mr. Potter, she said, her voice strained. Please come with me. There have been developments that concern your safety. Harry stood, clutching Morticia's letter. I know, Professor. I've just heard from my guardians. Something like relief flickered across McGonagall's face. I see. Nevertheless, Headmaster Dumbledore has requested your presence in his office immediately. A murmur ran through the common room. After everything in the letter, the idea of meeting privately with Dumbledore made Harry deeply uneasy. With respect, Professor, he said carefully, I prefer to wait until my guardians arrive tomorrow. Given what's happened at the Ministry today, I think they should be present for any discussions about my situation. McGonagall's lips thinned, but she nodded stiffly. Very well. In that case, I must insist you remain in Gryffindor Tower for the remainder of the night. Additional security measures are being implemented throughout the castle. After she departed, Harry turned to his friends. I need to contact the Addams family right away. Something feels wrong about all this. Up in the dormitory, safely away from curious ears, Harry retrieved the small silver mirror from his trunk. Morticia Addams, he spoke clearly to the reflective surface. The mirror clouded, then cleared to reveal Morticia's elegant features. Harry, she said, evident relief in her voice. You received my letter? Yes, Harry confirmed. And Professor McGonagall just came to take me to Dumbledore, but I refused. Wise decision. Gomez's face appeared beside Morticia's. The headmaster is in a precarious position right now. Being alone with you would not be prudent for either of you. What happens now? Harry asked. We're on our way to Hogwarts as we speak, Morticia explained. Grandmama's working with an unspeakable on the ritual preparations for your scar, and Cousin Itt is coordinating with Madame Bones regarding security concerns. The troll in the dungeons, Harry said urgently. It wasn't an accident. And there's something being guarded on the 3rd floor by a giant 3-headed dog. Gomez's eyebrows shot up. A Cerberus? At a school? How delightfully inappropriate. But concerning in context. Harry, listen carefully, whatever is being guarded may be what Voldemort's agent is after. The timing of this intrusion, on the very night his existence in your scar was revealed publicly, cannot be coincidence. His agent? Harry repeated. You mean someone at Hogwarts is working for Voldemort? It seems increasingly likely, Morticia confirmed grimly. The troll was merely a diversion. Stay in your dormitory, Harry. We'll be there by morning. The connection ended, leaving Harry staring at his own reflection. Behind him, Ron and Hermione exchanged worried glances. This is mental, Ron whispered. You know whose soul in your scar? A prophecy? Secret agents in the school? It explains a lot, though, Hermione pointed out. Why Harry's so famous, why Dumbledore took such an interest in his placement. And why my scar hurts sometimes, Harry added, his hand unconsciously rising to the lightning-shaped mark. Especially around certain people. A memory suddenly struck him, his scar hurting during the welcoming feast when he made eye contact with Snape. But it had happened again later, when Professor Quirrell had turned around and... Quirrell, Harry said suddenly. It's Quirrell. What? Ron and Hermione asked simultaneously. The troll was his distraction. He's the one after whatever's being guarded. My scar hurts around him, or more specifically, around the back of his head. That ridiculous turban is hiding something. Ron looked skeptical. Quirrell. The bloke's terrified of his own shadow. It's the perfect cover, Harry insisted, the pieces falling into place. Everyone underestimates him. And he conveniently fainted after announcing the troll, so no one would notice he'd disappeared during the chaos. Hermione's eyes widened. If you're right, he's probably going after whatever's being guarded right now, while everyone's distracted by the news from the Ministry and the troll. We need to tell McGonagall, Ron decided. She won't believe us without evidence, Harry shook his head. We need proof. What you need, came a new voice from the doorway, is to stay exactly where you are and let the adults handle this situation. They turned to find Percy Weasley standing there, his prefect badge gleaming. Professor McGonagall has ordered a complete lockdown of the dormitories. No one in or out until morning. But Percy, Ron protested, we think someone's trying to steal whatever that dog is guarding. Percy's expression shifted from authoritative to confused. Dog? What dog? The 3-headed monster on the 3rd floor. Ron exclaimed. That's enough, Percy said firmly. I don't know what you're playing at, but spreading rumors about mythical beasts in the castle isn't helping the current situation. Now I suggest you get some sleep. There will be plenty of time for explanations in the morning." After Percy left, closing the door firmly behind him, the three friends looked at each other in frustration. "We can't just sit here," Harry said quietly. "If Quirrell is working for Voldemort, and he gets whatever's hidden under that trapdoor." "But we promised your guardians you'd stay safe in the dormitory," Hermione reminded him. Harry thought for a moment, then reached into his trunk, pulling out a shimmering, silvery cloth. "They also suggested I keep this close at hand. My father's invisibility cloak." Ron's eyes widened. "Blimey. Those are really rare." "With that, we could—" "I'm not suggesting we go after Quirrell ourselves," Harry interrupted. "That would be mental. But we could check if he's in his office. If he's not there during a lockdown, that's evidence we can take to McGonagall." Hermione bit her lip. "That's actually reasonable. Just a quick check, then straight to Professor McGonagall if he's missing." "Exactly," Harry nodded. "We'll be careful. If we see anything dangerous, we turn around immediately." The invisibility cloak easily covered all three of them, though they had to move slowly and carefully to keep their feet hidden. The castle corridors were eerily silent, the usual ambient magic seemingly muted by the tension in the air. They made their way to Quirrell's office without incident, only to find it empty, the door slightly ajar. "That proves it," Harry whispered. "During a lockdown, all professors should be either patrolling or in their offices." "He could be patrolling," Hermione pointed out, though she didn't sound convinced. "Let's check the third-floor corridor," Harry suggested. "Just a quick look to see if the door's been tampered with." They proceeded cautiously, staying close to the walls and freezing whenever they heard distant footsteps. As they approached the forbidden corridor, they noticed something odd. The door to the three-headed dog's chamber was ajar, and soft music was drifting from within. "Someone's in there," Ron whispered. "And they've figured out how to get past the dog." "We should get McGonagall now," Hermione insisted. Harry was about to agree when a scream of pain echoed from beyond the door, Quirrell's voice, but with none of his usual stutter. "He's already gone through the trapdoor," Harry realized. "And something down there hurt him. All the more reason to get help." Hermione hissed. But Harry was already moving forward, drawn by an impulse he couldn't quite explain. Something about that scream suggested not just pain but rage and frustration, the sound of someone thwarted in their goal. "Harry, no." Hermione grabbed the cloak, nearly pulling it off all of them. "This is exactly what your guardians warned you against." Harry paused, the wisdom of her words penetrating his impulse to investigate. "You're right," he admitted, stepping back. "Let's find McGonagall." They had just turned to leave when the door to the forbidden chamber burst open. Quirrell staggered out, his turban askew, revealing a terrible sight on the back of his head, another face, pale and snake-like, its red eyes gleaming with malevolence. "Potter is near," the face hissed. "I sense my soul peace." The three students froze beneath the invisibility cloak, hardly daring to breathe. Quirrell's head swiveled unnaturally, the face on the back scanning the corridor. "There," the face suddenly shrieked. "Behind the invisibility cloak. Seize him." Quirrell lunged toward them with inhuman speed. Harry shoved his friends aside, the cloak slipping off as he ducked Quirrell's grasping hands. "Run!" Harry shouted to Ron and Hermione. "Get McGonagall. Get anyone." His friends hesitated only briefly before racing down the corridor, the cloak clutched in Hermione's hands. Quirrell ignored them, focusing entirely on Harry. "Harry Potter," the face on the back of Quirrell's head whispered. "We meet again. See what I have become. Mere shadow and vapor, forced to share another's body, but not for long. The Philosopher's Stone would have restored me, had this fool not triggered Dumbledore's final trap. But perhaps there is another way." Harry backed away, his wand drawn but his mind blank with terror. This was Voldemort, the murderer of his parents, the darkest wizard in generations, reduced to a parasite but still exuding malevolent power. Your scar, Voldemort continued, forcing Quirrell to walk backward so he could maintain eye contact with Harry. My Horcrux, how fitting that a piece of my soul has been growing within you all these years. The old fool Dumbledore thought to use you as a weapon against me, but he merely preserved a part of me in the process. They know about the Horcrux. Harry found his voice, continuing to back away. They know how to destroy it without killing me. Voldemort's laugh was high and cold. Do they? Ancient magic is not so easily undone, boy. That fragment is bound to your very life force. But perhaps we needn't be adversaries. Join me, Harry Potter. With my knowledge and your body, we could accomplish extraordinary things. I'd rather die, Harry spat, his fear transforming into anger. That can be arranged, Voldemort hissed. Quirrell. The possessed professor lunged forward, hands outstretched for Harry's throat. Acting on pure instinct, Harry raised his own hands to defend himself, grabbing Quirrell's wrists to push him away. The effect was instantaneous and astonishing. Where Harry's skin touched Quirrell's, the professor's flesh began to blister and smoke. Quirrell shrieked in agony, trying to pull away, but Harry instinctively tightened his grip. What is this magic? Voldemort screamed as Quirrell's skin continued to burn beneath Harry's touch. Your mother's protection, Potter. A new voice called from down the corridor. Severus Snape strode toward them, wand raised. The same magic that defeated him once before. Hold on. Harry didn't need telling twice. Despite the horrific sight of Quirrell's flesh crumbling beneath his fingers, he maintained his grip, even as the professor collapsed to his knees. Enough. Voldemort's voice commanded. With a terrible wrenching motion, a shadowy vapor began to tear itself free from Quirrell's body, abandoning its dying host. The wraith-like form of Voldemort hovered for a moment, its red eyes fixed on Harry with pure hatred. This isn't over, Potter, it hissed. There are other Horcruxes, other ways to return. And when I do, I will destroy everything you love. Before Snape could cast whatever spell he was preparing, the wraith shot upward through the ceiling, disappearing into the night. Quirrell slumped lifeless to the floor, his body already beginning to crumble into dust. Harry staggered backward, staring in horror at his hands, which showed no marks despite the devastating effect they'd had on Quirrell. Potter, Snape's voice was uncharacteristically subdued. Are you injured? And no, Harry managed, still staring at the disintegrating body before him. But Professor Quirrell is. Beyond help, Snape confirmed grimly. The Dark Lord is not known for his mercy toward failed servants. The corridor was suddenly filled with rushing footsteps as Professors McGonagall and Flitwick arrived, accompanied by Ron and Hermione. Behind them came a group Harry hadn't expected to see until morning, Gomez, Morticia, Grandmama, and an imposing witch in the robes of a ministry official. Harry. Gomez rushed forward, checking him for injuries with uncharacteristic seriousness. Are you hurt? What happened? Voldemort, Harry said simply, his legs finally giving way as the adrenaline left his system. He was possessing Quirrell. He tried to grab me, but when I touched him, his skin just burned. Lily's protection, Snape repeated to the adults. The same magic that defeated the Dark Lord that night. It appears physical contact with Potter is lethal to the Dark Lord and, by extension, his host. Fascinating, Grandmama murmured, examining Harry's hands without touching them. Love magic manifesting as a physical defense. Most unusual. This changes our approach to the ritual, the ministry which observed. Director Bones will want to know immediately. McGonagall looked shell-shocked, staring at Quirrell's remains with horror. Albus warned us there might be an attempt, but possession. Here at Hogwarts, under our very noses. Where is Dumbledore? Harry asked suddenly. Contained at the ministry, Morticia explained. After the revelations at the hearing, it was deemed prudent to limit his movements until a full investigation could be conducted. Which inadvertently created the perfect opportunity for the Dark Lord's agent to make his move, Snape observed bitterly. One wonders if that was entirely coincidental. The stone? Flitwick squeaked anxiously. Is it secure? Untouched, Snape confirmed. Quirrell triggered Dumbledore's mirror trap and could not proceed. As the adults continued discussing security measures and ministry protocols, Harry found himself being gently but firmly escorted away by Morticia, with Ron and Hermione following close behind. You should not have left your dormitory, Morticia said, though her tone held more concern than rebuke. Gomez and I nearly suffered simultaneous heart failure when your friends told us you were confronting Quirrell alone. I didn't know it would be Voldemort himself, Harry defended weakly. We just wanted to check if Quirrell was missing to prove our suspicions. A commendable bit of detection, Gomez acknowledged, joining them as they walked. But next time, perhaps share your brilliant deductions with the adults before investigating personally. Even Addamses approach immortal dark wizards with at least minimal preparation. Despite the gravity of the situation, Harry found himself smiling at Gomez's characteristic blend of pride and concern. The Addams family might have unconventional perspectives on danger, but they clearly cared deeply about his welfare. What happens now? Harry asked as they reached the hospital wing, where Madame Pomfrey was already preparing a bed despite his protests that he felt fine. Now, Grandmama said, joining them with a small wooden box in her gnarled hands, we remove that unwanted passenger from your scar. Tonight, while the veil remains thin and the Dark Lord is weakened from the loss of his host. Here. Now. Harry asked, surprised. The castle's magical foundations make it an ideal location, Morticia explained. And after tonight's events, waiting would be unwise. Voldemort knows about the Horcrux now. He may attempt to exploit the connection. The next hour passed in a blur of preparations. The hospital wing was cleared of other patients, ancient runes were chalked on the floor around Harry's bed, and unusual ingredients were arranged in precise patterns. Madame Pomfrey looked increasingly concerned but was overruled by the ministry which, an unspeakable, Harry gathered from the conversations, who worked alongside Grandmama with surprising compatibility. Ron and Hermione were reluctantly sent back to Gryffindor Tower, with promises to visit Harry first thing in the morning. Professor McGonagall remained to represent Hogwarts' interests, while Snape contributed his expertise in both dark magic and protective potions. Will it hurt? Harry asked as Grandmama directed him to lie in the center of the chalk circle. Not in the conventional sense, Grandmama replied honestly. You'll feel separation. The Horcrux has been part of you for a decade. Its removal will create a sense of loss, even though that loss is beneficial. Like pulling out a rotten tooth, Gomez suggested. Momentary pain for lasting health. The ritual itself was both simpler and more profound than Harry had expected. No dramatic incantations or spectacular magical effects, just Grandmama and the unspeakable working methodically with elements Harry didn't recognize, speaking occasionally in a language that seemed to slip from his comprehension even as he heard it. He felt the moment the Horcrux began to separate, a sensation like a long-embedded splinter finally working its way out. His scar burned white-hot, then ice-cold, then burned again. Dark mist rose from the lightning-shaped mark, coalescing into a small, dense cloud that writhed as if alive. Grandmama captured this essence in a specially prepared container, her face grim with concentration. It's fighting, she muttered. Clever little parasite. Focus on what is uniquely you, Harry, Morticia encouraged from beyond the circle. Your memories, your feelings, your choices, not his. Harry closed his eyes, concentrating on what made him Harry, his friendship with Ron and Hermione, his wonder at discovering magic, the feeling of family he'd found with the Addamses. As he focused on these connections, the pain in his scar diminished, replaced by a curious lightness, as if a weight he'd never recognized had finally been lifted. It's done, the unspeakable announced finally. The soul fragment has been contained. Grandmama held up a small black box carved with symbols, now sealed with what looked like silver wires. Not destroyed yet, she cautioned. That requires more specific methods. But separated and contained, yes. Harry sat up carefully, feeling strangely hollow yet energized. He reached up to touch his scar, finding it cool to the touch for the first time in memory. "How do you feel, my boy?" Gomez asked anxiously. "Different," Harry replied honestly. "Lighter. Clearer, somehow, like there was static in my head I never noticed until it stopped." Morticia smiled. "The mind adapts to almost anything, even the presence of a foreign soul fragment. Now you can begin to discover who you truly are, without Voldemort's influence." "And who Voldemort is without a piece of himself," the unspeakable added cryptically. "This container will be valuable for tracking his other Horcruxes." "Other Horcruxes?" McGonagall repeated, aghast. "There are more of these abominations." The Wraith mentioned others, Harry confirmed, remembering Voldemort's final threat. Right before he fled. This information set off another round of urgent adult discussions that Harry was too exhausted to follow. Madame Pomfrey finally intervened, insisting that her patient needed rest regardless of Dark Lords or soul fragments or ministry emergencies. As Harry drifted toward sleep, lulled by a potion that tasted oddly of cherries and something metallic, he heard Gomez's voice, uncharacteristically solemn. "The game has changed entirely, Tish. The Dark Lord, the prophecy, the Horcruxes, this is no longer just about custody." "It never was," Morticia's reply came softly. "From the moment we found him, we became part of a story much larger than ourselves. The question is no longer whether we can protect Harry from Dumbledore's manipulations, but whether we can help him face what lies ahead. And we will," Gomez declared with renewed vigor. "The Addams family has faced darkness before. We've danced with death, bargained with demons, and outwitted entities from beyond the veil. What's one more Dark Lord to add to the collection?" Harry smiled faintly as sleep claimed him. Whatever came next, whether further confrontations with Voldemort, continued political battles with Dumbledore, or simply the everyday challenges of growing up magical, he would face it with the Addams family at his side. And that, he decided drowsily, made all the difference in the world. The weeks following what the Daily Prophet dramatically dubbed the Halloween Revolution, brought more changes to Wizarding Britain than most had seen in a decade. Dumbledore, though not formally charged with any crimes, found himself temporarily removed from his positions as Chief Warlock and Supreme Mugwump, though he retained his headmaster role under strict oversight from the Board of Governors. Sirius Black was formally exonerated after a public trial where Veritaserum testimony revealed the truth about the Potter's betrayal. Still recovering from his years in Azkaban, he took up residence in the Addams family's London home, forming an unlikely but effective alliance with Harry's unconventional guardians. The Ministry of Magic, forced to acknowledge multiple failures in justice and oversight, instituted a series of reforms championed by Amelia Bones, whose power within the ministry had grown considerably following her handling of the Potter case. And at Hogwarts, Harry Potter, now freed from both Voldemort's soul fragment and Dumbledore's careful management, began to forge his own path forward. "The balance of power has shifted permanently," Lucius Malfoy observed to Gomez Addams as they stood in the Ministry atrium following another hearing, this one addressing the Philosopher's Stone incident. "Dumbledore's infallibility has been questioned, the boy who lived has escaped his influence, and the Dark Lord's return has been exposed before he could regain power. One might almost think it was planned." Gomez smiled enigmatically, twirling his mustache. "The Addams family believes in justice, Mr. Malfoy. Sometimes justice requires appending the entire game board rather than making the expected moves." Malfoy studied him with newfound respect. "You Americans are more disruptive than I anticipated. My associates had dismissed you as eccentric foreigners without real influence." "A common mistake," Gomez agreed cheerfully. "One Dumbledore made as well. Cultural bias is such a limiting perspective, don't you think?" Indeed, Malfoy's smile didn't reach his eyes. I wonder, though, what your next move will be. Having secured the boy's custody and exposed both Dumbledore's manipulations and the Dark Lord's survival, what does the Addams family want from Wizarding Britain? Want? Gomez seemed genuinely puzzled. We want what any family wants, to raise our children in a world that doesn't sacrifice them for political expediency or prophetic convenience. If that requires restructuring your society's approach to power, well. He shrugged expressively. Merely a pleasant side effect. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Morticia, accompanied by a healthier-looking Sirius Black and a distinguished goblin in formal banking attire. "Ah, Lucius," Sirius greeted Malfoy with barely concealed hostility. "Explaining how you miraculously avoided Azkaban despite your prominent role in Voldemort's inner circle." Malfoy's expression hardened. "Imperious curse, as the Ministry determined, Black. Not that I expect someone who spent a decade in Azkaban to appreciate legal nuance." "Gentlemen," Morticia interjected smoothly, "surely we can maintain civility despite our diverse perspectives on recent history. After all, we share a common interest in Harry's well-being." "Do we?" Malfoy raised an eyebrow. Naturally, Morticia smiled her enigmatic smile. "Your son and Harry are schoolmates. And regardless of past allegiances, I suspect no parent wishes to see a world where children become chess pieces in old men's games, whether those men style themselves Dark Lords or leaders of the light." The implicit challenge hung in the air between them. Malfoy finally inclined his head slightly. "You make an interesting point, Mrs. Addams. Perhaps there is common ground to be found." With a final measuring look at the group, he departed, his expensive robes billowing dramatically. "I don't trust him," Sirius muttered once Malfoy was out of earshot. "Nor should you," Gomez agreed cheerfully. "But enemies who fear you can be as useful as allies who love you. Politics, my dear Sirius, is simply war conducted through more civilized channels. The Goblin Nation has found the Addams approach to politics refreshing," commented their goblin companion, who had been silently observing the exchange. "Directness combined with strategic chaos creates opportunities that conventional negotiation cannot." "High praise indeed from the masters of financial warfare," Gomez bowed slightly. "Has the audit been completed, Director Ragnarok?" "It has," the goblin confirmed. "The Potter accounts show systematic redirection of funds over 10 years, as you suspected. While technically legal due to Dumbledore's guardianship status, the pattern suggests a coordinated effort to finance certain political factions and organizations while limiting the heir's access to his full resources." "As we thought," Morticia nodded. "And the other matter?" Ragnarok's expression grew more serious. "Our curse breakers have confirmed your mother-in-law's theory. The magical signature from the contained soul fragment matches traces found in a vault belonging to the Lestrange family. It appears another Horcrux may be stored within Gringotts itself." Sirius paled. "Bellatrix's vault. Of course he'd trust his most fanatical follower with a piece of his soul. This presents a unique regulatory challenge," Ragnarok continued. "Gringotts law forbids us from accessing client vaults without proper authorization, yet harboring a soul fragment violates our treaties with the magical government. A conundrum indeed." Gomez's eyes gleamed with the excitement of a complex legal puzzle. "But perhaps there's a solution that satisfies all parties. The Black family has certain connections to the Lestrange line through marriage, does it not?" Sirius caught on immediately. "As head of the Black family, I might have grounds to audit vaults connected to family members in prison for life, especially if I had reason to believe they contained dark artifacts that could harm the family's interests." "Precisely." Gomez clapped him on the shoulder. "A purely internal banking matter, requiring no ministry involvement at all." Ragnarok's sharp teeth gleamed in what might have been a smile. Gringotts would naturally cooperate with such a reasonable request from a valued client. Especially one with such interesting associates. As they continued discussing the technicalities of magical banking law and family inheritance statutes, Morticia found her thoughts turning to Harry, currently finishing his first year at Hogwarts. The boy they had discovered in that suburban garden less than a year ago had already experienced more upheaval and danger than most wizards faced in a lifetime. Yet through it all, he had shown remarkable resilience and growth. His letters described not just classes and Quidditch, a sport Gomez had enthusiastically embraced, even attempting to introduce exploding bludgers to the rulebook, but also friendships, discoveries, and a growing sense of his own identity separate from both his famous past and his prophesied future. Their custody was now permanent, formalized through both magical and mundane legal systems. Sirius, as godfather, had fully supported the arrangement, recognizing that his own recovery would take time and that Harry had found genuine acceptance with the Addams family. Dumbledore, though diminished in authority, remained headmaster of Hogwarts, a compromise that Gomez had surprisingly supported. "Keep your friends close and your enemies where you can watch them," he had explained to a puzzled ministry official. Besides, revolution works best when it's gradual enough for people to adapt without panicking. Complete overthrow leads to chaos, strategic realignment leads to lasting change. The most significant change, however, was in the wizarding world's understanding of Voldemort's status. No longer could officials pretend the Dark Wizard was permanently defeated. The public now knew he had survived through dark magic and could potentially return again. This knowledge had created an unprecedented opportunity for preparation. Already, Amelia Bones was restructuring the Aura Department, international magical cooperation was strengthening, and even ordinary citizens were learning basic defensive magic rather than relying entirely on the Ministry for protection. "Mrs. Addams." Sirius's voice broke into her thoughts. "They're ready for us in courtroom 3. The final adoption proceedings." Morticia nodded, composing herself. Today would formalize what their hearts had already decided months ago, that Harry Potter was, in every way that mattered, part of the Addams family. The proceedings were mercifully straightforward, with even Dumbledore offering no objections from his position of diminished influence. When the final magical bond was sealed, a warm golden light enveloped Harry momentarily, magic itself recognizing the new family connection. "Is it supposed to be gold?" Harry whispered, looking slightly alarmed. "I expected something more. Addams-like. Black or green, maybe." "Magic has a sense of humor," Grandmama explained with a cackle. "Gold for a golden boy. But don't worry, once we get home, we'll perform the traditional Addams adoption ritual too. Much more dramatic, that one. Involves a ceremonial knife and at least 3 kinds of blood." "She's joking," Sirius hastily assured the wide-eyed ministry official nearby. "Mostly joking. Probably joking. The point is," Gomez declared, throwing an arm around Harry's shoulders, "you're officially ours now. Potter Addams, if you like the hyphen, or just Potter with Addams in spirit, whatever feels right to you, my boy." Harry looked around at the unlikely family he'd acquired, Gomez with his boundless enthusiasm, Morticia with her quiet strength, Grandmama with her ancient wisdom, Wednesday and Pugsley with their macabre interests, Sirius with his gradually returning mischievous spirit, even cousin Itt and Thing who had become fixtures in his life. "I think," he said carefully, "that names matter less than belonging. And I belong with all of you." "Beautifully said," Gomez declared, pulling out a handkerchief to dab at his eyes. "Now, who's ready for the celebration? We've rented out that lovely restaurant in Diagon Alley, the one with the singing Banshee Quartet and the spontaneously combusting desserts." As they left the ministry as a legally recognized family, Harry noticed people watching them, some with curiosity, others with lingering suspicion, a few with outright hostility. The wizarding world was still adjusting to everything that had happened since the Addams family had burst into their orderly society. But for perhaps the first time in his life, Harry didn't care about others' judgments. He had found his place in a family that celebrated his uniqueness rather than fearing it, that faced darkness with laughter rather than denial, and that would stand with him whatever challenges lay ahead. Voldemort was still out there, gathering strength. The prophecy still hung over Harry's future. Dumbledore, though diminished, remained a formidable player in the great game of magical politics. But Harry Potter Addams, he rather liked the hyphen, he decided, was no longer facing these forces alone or unprepared. He had a family now, perhaps the strangest, most macabre family in either the magical or mundane world, but one that had changed everything simply by seeing a neglected boy in a garden and refusing to look away. Ready for whatever comes next? Morticia asked softly as they stepped into the summer sunshine. Harry smiled, feeling the curious lightness that had remained since the Horcrux's removal. With this family behind me? Absolutely. After all, when darkness meets magic, extraordinary things happen. And the Addams family had always specialized in the extraordinary. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.